Okay, thank you everyone for coming today. We've got a seminar that goes on for a couple of hours, and we've got networking, and we're expecting more guests as the afternoon progresses. But first off, before kind of starting today's introduction of the seminar, I just want to remind everyone why we're coming together today to discuss this very important topic about heritage preservation and economic development in ASEAN. The objective here is really to start the conversation. I think all of us individually and as an industry are thinking about it, but as a discussion about how it's relevant to economic growth has been kind of on the sidelines. So in partnership with the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with our co-host, the SCE Architects Asia, which is led by Luigi Camagnali. He'll introduce himself later today as well. And then of course, Vietcetera as the media partner. We like to kickstart that conversation and get things kind of moving in the context of not only Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh City, but also in the greater Southeast Asia. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the Consul General of Italy, Dante Brandi, up, and he'll give a short speech to welcome everybody. Thank you, Dante. Yeah.
Welcome you all here, of course, in presence, and a warm welcome also to all guests and speakers connected in video conference. My name is Dante Brandi. I'm the Consul General of Italy in Ho Chi Minh City. And I have to say to my friend Hao that the conversation has already started on this issue a few years ago, and we are very happy to keep going the conversation and very happy that you are on board from now on. First, I would like to stress that I am delivering these opening remarks also on behalf of Ambassador Antonio Alessandro, the Italian ambassador in Hanoi, who is leading the overall Sistema Italia in Vietnam, and also is leading our strategy to promote cultural heritage in this country and in the whole ASEAN region. I join Hao in thanking, of course, my ministry, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, which supported this event and was able, thanks to the ministry, we were able to expand this event to the ASEAN region overall. A special thanks also to the network of the Italian embassies in ASEAN region, which have been instrumental to connect, to gather relevant speakers to today's event. And of course, a special thanks to the Italia-ASEAN Association, to Unesco Vietnam, which is a long-standing partner in this endeavor, to the Italian Chambers of Commerce in Malaysia, Singapore, and Vietnam for their support, to the Venice Architectural Association, to Savills Vietnam, and of course to the co-organizers, SCE Asia with Luigi Campanale, and Vietcetera as a media partner, and to all the prominent speakers from such different geographies, both in Italy and in ASEAN countries. This is the 7th event over the last 2 years, arranged by SCE in cooperation with us and two other Italian embassies in the region, from Malaysia to Myanmar to Vietnam, focusing on heritage preservation. And this is, I think, the best demonstration of a consistent mission we have as Italy to promote cultural heritage as a key factor for economic development. Cultural heritage is, in our view, a soft power element, but with a huge potential for economic development. Today's webinar will focus on the impact of heritage on the hospitality industry mainly, and we'll do it from different perspectives, from adaptive reuse of buildings to new trends in hospitality, renovation, legislative instruments, and incentive policies. But we know how the cultural heritage goes also beyond the hospitality industry. And let me mention in this regard the creative industries, for example. As a Consul General in Ho Chi Minh City, I have assisted over the last months and years to a lot of discussions about how to promote the creative industry in Vietnam, and I'm sure a similar debate is going on in all ASEAN countries. Well, let me tell you that heritage preservation, at least to the eyes of an Italian, is a crucial factor to develop a creativity and a creative industry, because it's where identity reaffirms. Creativity in arts, performance, design, get inspiration out of it. And we had a vivid demonstration of that in the last Italian Design Day events, which have been arranged by, again, the network of Italian embassies in the ASEAN regions and worldwide. And in the case of Vietnam, we had the design ambassador, Architetto Marco Casamonti, who delivered a very impressive keynote speech, exactly reminding how cultural heritage could be a source of inspiration for design in architecture and for many other creative industries. So that is why Italy promotes definitely cultural heritage, and we are not the only one, of course, as a vehicle for economic development, as a factor of identity building and reaffirmation of one's identity, and as a driver of promotion of creative industry in these countries and as everywhere. It's a consistent topic also for our foreign policy. It would be a priority in the current Italian presidency of the G20, which has now started officially since December the 1st. In that forum, we would like to stimulate a multilateral approach to the heritage preservation, also as a way to promote sustainable development. Think, for example, to the effect that could have on climate change. We would like to promote cultural heritage in terms of education. And also we would like to stimulate a discussion on a multilateral level, for example, on topics like the illegal trafficking of cultural masterpieces. So it's natural that this is also a component in our policy with ASEAN countries, with which we enjoy, since this year, the status of cooperation partner. And as indicated by the Secretary General of ASEAN in a recent meeting with our ambassador to Jakarta, cultural heritage is a priority for the organization, and Italy is, of course, ready to play its part in it. And it is, of course, a component in our bilateral relations with Vietnam. Just to make the closest example, culture and tourism will be part of the Joint Commission on Economic Cooperation between the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, scheduled to take place next Monday, 14th, in video conference, of course. So in this framework, we not only salute, but we will renew our commitment for the development of a multi-stakeholder dialogue able to promote cultural heritage preservation. Always happy to try to push forward the envelope, and thanks to the involvement of authorities, academia, and the private sector. Now, it is also my great honor to introduce the video intervention of Mr. Enrico Letta, who is the former Prime Minister of Italy, and now currently President of Italy-ASEAN Association, for his message. So thank you all once again for being here and for joining the webinar, and I wish you all a very fruitful session. Thank you.
So as Dante mentioned, we're going to have this video message from Enrico Letta now.
We are in a very important year for the Italy-ASEAN relationships. The improvement of this relationship at formal level decided by ASEAN authorities some months ago is, I think, a very important demonstration of goodwill from the ASEAN side, and is the way also to push Italy to go forward. We think that at world level in this part of the year, we are trying to see what are the new opportunities for this cooperation. But I'm sure in the future, this cooperation can be improved more and more. In Italy, we are working a lot in this direction. And I'm sure that also this very important initiative on heritage preservation and on how to boost economic development can give an important contribution. I'm very much convinced that this work needs a very important acknowledgement by not only the authorities, the institutions, but also by the businessmen, the business people, and the academic institutions. This is why we are working in this direction. This is why I think today's initiative is so important, so positive. We can't divide business from culture. We have to merge, we have to consider everything together, because only like that we can work together and we can have improvements and important achievements as we want to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Enrico, for that message from Italy. We're going to now move on to the next kind of introduction. We're going to have Michael Croft. He's the director of UNESCO in Vietnam. Michael's calling in from Hanoi today. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here. His presentation will be about the UNESCO Creative Cities Network in the context of ASEAN. So without further ado, we're gonna allow Michael here to share his screen. Michael, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. We're going to share the screen just now.
Excellent. Okay, there we go.
How are we doing? Are you doing okay now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, friends, ladies and gentlemen. My best regards as well to my friend Dante. I think after the introduction by Dante and also Mr. Letta, I don't have to explain why UNESCO would be happy to be part of this discussion. I think it's pretty clear why we're here, why I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to give a brief presentation on a platform that hopefully empowers ASEAN and ASEAN cities to do just what we're talking about, to leverage their rich cultural heritage and the rich tangible and intangible heritage to foster sustainable economic development. I'm going to talk today about that platform specifically, which is the UNESCO Creative Cities Network, and its manifestation in ASEAN, and so how ASEAN cities can leverage that cultural legacy that they have for sustainable development. So let's move on to the next slide. So I'm going to play a short video after this, which will help you visualize a little bit more the network. But I think I need just maybe to say a few words as background. So the UNESCO Creative Cities Network was launched in 2004. And the basic idea of it was to promote cooperation between and within cities that identified creativity and the creative industries as a strategic factor for their sustainable urban development. But to tell you the truth, the network really started to take off with Agenda 2030 and the launch of the SDGs in 2015. So the network provides cities with a forum to brainstorm between themselves and also within themselves, if I can put it that way, on the role of creativity as a driver and enabler for sustainable urban development and a platform for implementing SDGs at the city level. Now, when cities actually apply for a designation of creative cities, they apply under one of 7 different criteria. So we have the first criteria is craft and folk arts. The second is creative design. The third is film. Fourth is gastronomy. Fifth is literature. Sixth is music. And seventh is media arts. When cities apply to join the network, their call to join is opened up every 2 years. The last call was in 2019, so the next call will be next year in 2021. Applications are reviewed by peer cities who are already in the network, who make recommendations to UNESCO, who makes the final decision. And a key thing that I should mention is that the cities, when they join, are responsible to provide 4-year action plans, which outlines how they will implement the creative city in their respective area. And they also have to provide UNESCO with quadrennial or 4-year reports to retain the designation. So there is a responsibility on the city side. So with that, I'm going to move on to the video, just a short video, just under 2 minutes, just to give you a sense of the Creative Cities Network of UNESCO. All right. So on the assumption that you can hear me and I'm back with you, so that video was just to give you a better sense of the network. Although the video speaks of roughly 180 cities, I think, actually the network is now expanded to some 264 cities globally. In terms of networking, before maybe I speak a little bit to ASEAN, that there's an annual conference, a global conference, which is held every year by one of the designated cities. And this is complemented by regular regional conferences, such as the first Asia Pacific UNESCO Creative Cities Conference, which was held last year in Adelaide, as well as by global summits, which are held every couple of years by the People's Republic of China. So there is opportunities for formal network and sharing. Apart from this, there are a lot of different projects between cities, sometimes in pairs and also sometimes in groupings. In any case, I think that we can say is that this network seems almost tailor-made for Southeast Asia, which is a vibrant and dynamic region with significant advantages, having a young workforce, young demographics, rich cultural diversity, rich cultural heritage, and also an area of rapid economic transformation, digitalization, and new creative hubs. So if we look at this slide of the UNESCO Creative Cities in ASEAN region, we can see that there are 11 creative cities now in 5 ASEAN countries. We have 4 in Thailand, 3 in Indonesia, 2 in the Philippines, and then 1 each in Vietnam and in Singapore. 5 of the cities, so almost half, joined in 2019, and I think, or I'd like to think, that this reflects the increased popularity and visibility of the network. In terms of what we have in terms of designation, interesting to note, we have 5 cities of creative design, 4 with craft and folk arts designations, and then 1 for gastronomy and 1 for music. So what I wanted to do is maybe just take a quick look today at a few of these cities to look at some of the rationale which they've provided for the designation and how they see the creative city as both a narrative and a network for change. So let's go to the next slide. So for Singapore, if we take Singapore, we see in the application of the city, Singapore talks about harnessing design to improve the quality of life. And they noted that Singapore is a city-state that has, of course, big regional aspirations, but also limited land and natural resources. And so that the key aspect of governance, from housing to education to healthcare, water management, transportation, have to be carefully designed to enable Singapore to thrive and be sustainable. And in particular, so that they look at that in terms of design to support their sustainable growth, but also specifically for the design sector, they've elaborated a master plan to strengthen the capacities of local design professionals to be more competitive globally, to foster innovation, research, and development to enhance productivity and competitiveness of the design sector at the international level, and also to support initiatives that empower small and medium enterprises to leverage design as a driver for the city's economic and social growth. going to the next slide, we see a different city, Chiang Mai in Thailand. Now, Chiang Mai's reporting emphasizes a city that has a long history, which is very rich in cultural value, especially in the areas of craft and folk art. And so they say that the unique charm and distinctive identity of Chiang Mai has inspired its citizens to identify opportunities to develop and utilize the most exceptional aspects of the city's cultural heritage to generate income and to revitalize the economies of local communities through creativity and also promote sustainable conservation. And so in Chiang Mai, the local authorities have elaborated specific action plans, which help craftspeople from across different occupations, different ages, different ethnicities, each having its own unique and artistic and creative perspective, to use craft and folk art as a driving force to maintain the growth of the creative economy and strengthen the promotion and preservation of local heritage. Next slide, we see the example of Bangkok. Looking at the application of Bangkok to the network, it noted that the creative energy of Bangkok's diverse people, inspired by the surrounding multicultural treasures of the city, represents the city's greatest asset. And it's this diversity that propels Bangkok's design development, for Bangkok is a city of creative design, and also what helps make the city a popular tourist attraction. So with this blend of old and new forming the fundamental ingredients of the city's design evolution. And Bangkok also notes that as a hub of design education, the city is home to eminent design professionals and also major design schools, which serve both the public and private sectors. So providing a strong knowledge base for the city's inclusive and sustainable future. Next slide, Bandung in Indonesia. This is another city that emphasizes the development of skills for its population and its narrative, and described in its latest reporting to UNESCO the establishment of the city as an innovative hub of creative design to enhance the knowledge and creative skills of young people. And so they note that with initiatives driven by the city's young demographic, they've hosted a variety of workshops and conferences and festivals, all encouraging the development of creativity and product design. And now that they've also established 8 surrounding urban villages as creative villages. So they see themselves as possessing valuable expertise in the development of creative cities, and also within Indonesia as a pilot city, demonstrating the potential of creative industries in Indonesia, not just in design, but in other fields as well. Finally, next slide, a little closer to home. Hanoi. So for Hanoi, it's an interesting case and one I'm quite familiar with, having been involved in it. Last year represented an important milestone for Hanoi because it was the 20th anniversary of the UNESCO designation of Hanoi as a city of peace, an international city of peace. This designation, or the 20th anniversary, prompted a reflection on behalf of the city to look at what Hanoi is 20 years later. And of course, Hanoi is a much different city than it was in 1999. And this reflection basically centered around the fact that while the city has transformed physically and economically in ways that it's almost not recognizable from 20 years ago, has the cultural and social growth of the capital reflected that? Has it kept up? And also, has the cultural and social growth of the capital, does it reflect the rich cultural legacy of Hanoi? And also, is that development supporting sustainable development and local cultures and local communities? And also as well, what sort of image and messaging about the capital city of Vietnam should Hanoi be projecting in the 21st century? And so the long and the short of it is that they came to the Creative Cities Network and made their application based a little bit on this reflection. And they applied as a creative city of design as almost as an aspirational basis, noting that the designation of a creative city of creative design would be the designation that they could leverage the most to change their development pathway, and looking at the designation not so much as an outcome, but really as a first step to establishing a creative capital, and then to work to make this a reality, especially with the engagement of young people. So for Hanoi, it's really, the designation is something that they look to sort of to see as a transformation and a way to position themselves and influence their development in the 21st century based on that rich cultural legacy and rich cultural heritage that they have. finally, we get to the end here. So basically, to conclude, just very simply, so why am I telling you all this? Well, what the Creative Cities Network and the member cities experience says is that a couple of things. That first of all, that culture and development are not natural enemies, that they are natural friends. Secondly, and I think my Italian friends will recognize that my being influenced a little bit by architect Casamonte during Italian design days, I'm going to paraphrase what the architect said. He talked about that when we create, when we innovate, we don't do it from a blank page. Our starting point when we are creative, or if we have a creative act, is from our observations, from our memories, from our experiences, from our heritage, be it a site, a building, a product, a dance, a song, so that heritage is a necessary condition for creation. And then finally, that the UNESCO Creative Cities Network offers ASEAN cities, and I think that ASEAN cities are recognizing this, the opportunity to leverage the rich heritage to expand the creative industries, as opposed to heavy industries, with a view to supporting sustainable and inclusive social economic development. And by doing this, also finding a way to bolster their national, their regional, and the global profile at the same time. So I want to thank everybody for your listening, for your time today, and for the invitation to speak. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you to Michael Croft, again, the director at UNESCO in Hanoi in Vietnam. Hopefully we'll see more smart cities or creative cities in Vietnam in the years to come. So next up, we're going to have our colleague Romeo Orlandi. He is the ASEAN Vice President, Scientific Vice President of the Italy-ASEAN Association. He will be zooming in from Italy. Romeo, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent. Could you turn on your video too? It'd be lovely to see you, if possible.
It's already on.
It's already on? Okay, maybe technically you guys can find him. Anyways, Romeo is going to give a bit of a kind of keynote about his experience in this association and what initiatives they're doing. We'll have it up shortly.
Shall I start?
Give us 30 seconds.
Okay.
Francesco, Luigi, and Enrico there.
Actually, probably I'm under the name of my president, Enrico Letta.
Right.
So probably, yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
here.
not Enrico Letta. Yeah.
All right, I've never met Romeo in person. So
yeah.
you should have said something, Dante. Anyways, finally, Romeo's here. So we're going to let Romeo take the stage.
Thank you, Nguyen. Thank you, Dante. Thanks all the friends in Vietnam. Welcome to this important event to which the Italy-ASEAN Association, also in the words of its president, Enrico Letta, wanted to give its support. As you know, our association was born 5 years ago with the ambition to fill a void of mutual knowledge, but above all, that of Italy towards the countries of Southeast Asia. As is well known, my country has an excellent reputation. Its products are known and loved. It does not register any animosity due to post-colonial bad memories. So the reputation, the image of Italy in the entire Far East, I'm allowed to say, is quite good. Yet, Italy struggles to win completely the hearts, the minds, and the consumption of local populations. Made in Italy products suffer from a bizarre contradiction. In Southeast Asia, they are known above all for its aspects related to consumer goods, let's say footwear, leather goods, fashion, furniture. But the majority of export from Italy are centered on capital goods, that is, on the mechanics needed to produce the splendid artifacts we know. This is just one example, maybe probably the best known for it shows the many possibilities, margins of improvement to which we are committed. And we work closely in addressing this issue together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, its diplomatic and consular network, all the institutions of Italy, and all the companies of Italy. A couple of years ago, we did the research on the Italian companies investing in Vietnam. You might be surprised that Vietnam ranks second after Singapore in Southeast Asia as a magnet for Italian companies. More than 100 Italian companies decide to choose Vietnam as a destination for their investments. The Italy-ASEAN Association was born 5 years ago in the occasion of a trip of the President of Republic Mattarella to Vietnam and Indonesia. On that occasion, our President Mattarella visited the ASEAN Secretary and headquarters in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta, and it was for the first time for a president of the Italian Republic. In 5 years, our activities focus on the organization of events, research, book publishing, and the organization of an annual event, the High-Level Economic Dialogue, which last year was organized right here in Hanoi, and saw the participation of over 400 Italian, Vietnamese, and Asian companies, along with the participation of Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc and the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. Together with the economic activity of the Italy-ASEAN Association, we have developed a side of cultural activity. We participated in an Italian film festival dedicated to Asia, and we wrote a book of which I was the curator on the relationship between religions and the economy in Southeast Asia. Our participation in today's event is pretty much in line with these intentions. The heritage economy can be defined in various ways. As you know, as has been already done in the previous speech you heard. The definition or the explanation of cultural identity, of social homogeneity, of the recovery of traditions. In this brief speech, I would just like to underline two aspects: the connection to the economy, as has been already said, and the role of Italy. Our first consideration might seem simplistic, but not simple. It might look a bit prosaic. The culture of the past as a value and an economic aspect, not only because it builds minds and strengthens the spirits, but because it plays a fundamental role in the economy, meaning it creates income and jobs. There is not a singular activity for, elite minds, for people in search of adventure. It is a question of allowing mass societies, citizens so far excluded from cultural circuit, to find and to appropriate of values that often have been separated from them. There is a research of quality of life in which culture, heritage, restoration, preservation, hospitality may altogether play an economic aspect and create global value. All this horizontal activity can be done in a sustainable, open, and profitable way. Today, there is a widespread sensitivity, a search for quality that must be satisfied, a globalization of aspiration which goes along the economy of globalization, which has been so far prevailing. But both cultural and economic globalization have showed the possibility of reducing the impact and the hate of borders among countries. Italy is probably second to none in heritage and experience. We heard the speech of UNESCO, and I mean, everybody knows that Italy has the highest number of UNESCO sites in the world. Italy has a long history and continuous uninterrupted sequence of artistic styles and cultural movements. Throughout the centuries, creation and conservation have marched together. The interest in the restoration, the quality of the intervention, the knowledge of the works have preserved our cities, maintaining their history and livability in their original structure. Historic centers and downtown are not abandoned places. On the contrary, they host tourists, economic business people, lovers of gastronomy, shopping, intellectuals, ordinary people in search of quality and involvement. This was the fortune of Italy. Actually, Italy, it's an open-air museum. Southeast Asia, in particular Vietnam, retain unique peculiarities, from the local tradition to cultural, artistic, and religious influence. All this, we know well, goes beyond the two big cities of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. This time I cannot be there with you for COVID-19, but I remember having traveled a lot in your country. I have a wonderful memory of it, also and above all of the small towns. A far-sighted, cultural, profitable operation that respects nature, place, and history could be concentrated there. Allow me to finish with a message of hope, work, and friendship. I congratulate everybody on the initiative and wish everybody a good job for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enrico. Just kidding. We know you're not. Go. Anyways, so that was Romeo. Thank you so much for taking time for us. We're going to move straight to our panel. Guido was unable to make it to the call today. So I'd like to invite Coca Nguyen. She is the design director at Kien Ah Corporation. Lots of residential projects in Saigon, but also resorts coming up. So she'll be kind of sharing those in a little bit. We'd also like to invite Sylvia. So actually, you're the only in-person panelist today, including myself, of course, as the moderator. She's unavailable, unfortunately. We have Sylvia Nguyen. She is from the Alpha Nam Real Estate kind of team. She is the CEO of that group. And then we also have Gerard Ray Lico from the University of the Philippines as the architect professor. So we're just going to kind of kick it off. We can take our seats here. Sylvia, are you there? Gerard?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Gerard's there. Sylvia, are you here?
Hi.
Sylvia, excellent, cool. Great, so we're gonna start with Sylvia here to kind of kick off our topic today, which is how adaptive reuse and capacity buildings can contribute to the development of the sustainable tourism sector. What is adaptive reuse? What is capacity buildings? We're talking about not only old buildings and transforming them into like hotels, but also using them as public spaces, as mechanisms to encourage economic and tourism development. So without further ado, Sylvia, I'd love to ask the first question for you here today. What are some major considerations for developers in ASEAN? And also please introduce yourself before answering this question. For adaptive reuse and restoration, and what's preventing more of these developers from taking this approach? We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Hao. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would just like to say thank you so much for involving me in this wonderful discussion. I think it is the right time, it's the right place. And I'm so excited to be, talking more about it because there are definitely A lot of things, we could see the potentials of Hanoi, of different cities of Vietnam to become more, in the eyes of tourism and also internally to Vietnamese people as well. And, as a younger generation representation of developers and a very important sector in Vietnam, which is growing, that is real estate. I always feel there's a sense of responsibility in a way, because if we go back to Vietnam and we want to make Vietnam the next Singapore, the next China, then what is our identity, right? How do we learn and keep in sync all the things that we learn from other countries to make Vietnam uniquely something that is what everyone can see, but perhaps not all Vietnamese can see. And that is my vision going into every single one of our projects. A little very brief background about what I do in Alphanam Group. We build real estate in urban planning, in hospitality, and in also residential. In hospitality, we are currently Marriott's biggest partner in Vietnam. We have around 20 hotels in planning right now. And we are very much aware that everywhere we go, what we do helps shape the lives of the people living there, help shape the narratives of how people view their own culture. And when we travel, we see so much of that pride in other countries. And how do we make different sectors, the local people, the people who directly are a part of that culture, benefit from all of that culture and create a footprint that is sustainable.
Oh, audio got cut out.
Sorry?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. In terms of, I think difficulties, from the viewpoint of developers. First of all, if you look into adaptive reuse and restoration, the first question to ask would be, what really is the building's issue, right? Whether it is the building of space, is it not optimized enough for modern usage? Is it safety? How is the fire life safety in that building? The convenience, do you need to add more elevators, for example? And then thirdly would be the aesthetics, is the building, in need of a makeup, right? Makeover. And I think that in Vietnam, most buildings are highly protected, but not for the right reason sometimes. And not even talking about heritage buildings, even for buildings that is a takeover project, it is extremely difficult to make any changes. And I think that maybe Coca would have the same experience, but I deal with a lot of international developers and architects, and they have named Vietnam among one of the toughest countries to basically change anything in a building once it has been locked in by the construction permit. Because the investment license, the construction permit, has basically dictated every single meter square of space, what the usage should be. And therefore, there is very little intervention to be done, when you make use of a building. I think this can bring two different scenarios. One would be the buildings are extremely preserved because no one could do anything to it. Second is it actually limits a lot of creativity, because what if you want to change up the space because it no longer serves the same purpose when it was created 5 years ago. And I think that we're here to talk about the huge potential all of this discussion has on the Vietnam real estate scene, because it's very easy to see that Vietnam, with a huge population of young people, with a bustling population of artists, if we could all join in and lower the barrier to create an impact on the design of this building in real estate, hospitality in Vietnam, I think we have very exciting products to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. A little context too. So Sylvia, again, Alphanam Group is a very large, diversified conglomerate in Vietnam. They do manufacturing, but Sylvia is leading the real estate team. So anything related to land and real estate, hotels, 20 hotels in development. They're designing the JW Marriott in Sapa, Intercontinental in Sapa. They currently have a couple projects in Da Nang. And you may have noticed actually between Sylvia and Coca, we're seeing a kind of the Gen 2, very young, especially women developers who are innovating, hopefully open to new ideas. But obviously they're very well aware of the restrictions that are in the country, not just on the legal side, but practicality too. Sylvia, of the 20 hotels, most of them are new, of course. But for those of you that have gone to Hanoi's diplomatic quarter a lot, you may have noticed Alpha Nam, they have this beautiful 100-year-old villa, I want to say, right on the corner of Lee Thien Kiat and Baju. Maybe you can talk about like why you think, the limitations aside from the permit side, but building kind of taking over these old kind of buildings and renovating them, it's sometimes just not possible. But looking deeper into cities like your family company's villa, why do you guys maintain that kind of space and how you've readapted it for kind of modern uses?
So we took over this building, I think about 5-6 years ago. And we knew about the history of the building. First of all, it was the Indochine Bureau office, and then after that, it was the office of BCCI before we took over. And when you take over such an important location in the city, everyone would think about the economic use of the space. How much is it per meter square, right? And right away, the next question is, what is the building height limit? How much can we build here? And it was a very tough discussion between me and the family when I also asked them about, what about the heritage of the building, and can you really put a value on what the building would represent, hundreds of years from now? Because in terms of office space, we could always build a bigger office elsewhere. This building is also now only part of our office. But in terms of the architectural language of the center of Hanoi, I think it's so important to preserve, some parts of the DNA of what makes Hanoi what it is. And this conversation, I think that everyone who lives and works in Hanoi would have the same feeling that I do. So, in our work, what my philosophy is that I know that sometimes it is very difficult for people to see that, preservation, culture, economics can go hand in hand. But hopefully with the way that we are using the space, with the way that we're trying to preserve the destinations that we go to, other companies would be able to relate to that, and we would be able to keep more heritage buildings like the current office that I occupy now in Hanoi.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sylvia, for your comment on that. I'd like to move on to Gerardo as well. Same question for you, but coming from a different ASEAN perspective. You're calling in from the Philippines today. A different set of challenges, I imagine, within the framework of the Philippines, but also from a heritage point of view. In Vietnam, it's obviously mostly French, but in the Philippines, I guess more Spanish. How has that kind of dictated kind of what you've seen in the scope of the Philippines here about adaptive reuse and major considerations for developers?
Good afternoon. In the Philippines, the idea that heritage building can be adaptively reused in a commercial setting is fairly new, as the National Heritage Law in the Philippines, which protects heritage assets in the Philippines, was only enacted in the year 2010. Until recently, the default approach would take a form of a cafe, restaurant, or a museum. Because of the unfamiliarity of adaptive reuse for commercial development, not many developers in the Philippines are keen to take on what they perceive to be a big risk, the cost of conserving and rehabilitating the old buildings versus a new construction. There's a mindset for many that heritage structures are nuisance to a developer. They are costly to conserve, occupy precious real estate commodity, diminish saleable floor area of the development. Some old buildings were doomed to be demolished, but some have become mere thin veneer of history of facadism. Hence, most of the successful conservation efforts in the Philippines are primarily government initiated and applied to government-owned structure intended for public use. In some places, such as in Vigan, in Ilocos, Escolta in Manila, Bacolod and Silay in Negros, Iloilo City, all downtown areas with a collection of extant heritage structures have managed to adaptively reuse these assets in varying degrees of success, typically with little modification to the original structure. However, developers are only beginning to discover more radical approaches to adaptive reuse, adding a tower to an existing structure, combining two adjacent structures, or anchoring a large new land development or township on key heritage assets. They have become a destination in itself and have catalyzed tourism and creative industries in their respective locales. For instance, in Intramuros, in Manila, the Spanish colonial walled city, many heritage sites have been restored and adaptively reused through government efforts. The city has recently been hailed as the top tourism attraction in 2020 World Travel Awards, beating 8 other destinations worldwide. The Department of Tourism and Intramuros Administration, the government entities overseeing the walled city, have been working on a comprehensive conservation management plan for the district and preparing initiatives for its inclusion in the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. Similarly, in one of my projects in Baguio City, plans are underway for the restoration of the Dominican Hill Retreat House, also known as the Diplomat Hotel, and its adaptive reuse as the central creative hub for the UNESCO Creative Cities Network initiative of the city. The government has also initiated restoration works for other sites in the country, such as the Baroque churches of the Philippines listed as World Heritage Site. Such sites have anchored local tourism programs. In many cases, however, there is a technical legal barrier, as well as how and where to begin, how much will it cost, whom to consult, what legal steps to be taken. While adaptive reuse and restoration programs abound, there are still many heritage property owners and communities that are not aware of the value of their heritage assets and the steps and processes they can take to preserve and integrate this into the contemporary urban development. Thus, I think there is a need to spread a greater awareness of how heritage structures can provide added value to a new development and improve. For example, when taking on this project, the company, the developer, can improve its public relation. There's also a need for heritage practitioner to have higher visibility in the public sphere to share their ideas and provide technical expertise to make adaptive reuse project possible. So there are many hindrances right now. In basically, it boils down to to the lack of enforcement when it comes to preservation. So developers are shy away from adaptive reuse because they want to maximize the land asset.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing the perspective from the Philippines. I'd like to kick it off to Coca here. So again, Coca is the design director of Tien A. It's one of the oldest real estate developers in Vietnam. I think it's like 25 years. Anyways, I'll let her explain that. And as mentioned by Sylvia before too, in Vietnam, again, realistically, there's only so many heritage projects, but also there's limitations related to them. But we want to hear about how developers are also leveraging heritage in general, and not just for their own projects, but also within the cities and cultures they're part of. So we want to hear from Coca's perspective. Lots of projects in Saigon, but you're also working on a couple in Da Nang and also in Phu Nguyen. Is that right? Phu Nguyen.
Yeah, one in Phu Nguyen.
Yeah, Phu Nguyen. The one in Phu Nguyen is actually quite interesting because they're developing the Aliyah biome. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Aliyah. So Aliyah is a brand. It's owned by Hyatt. They're really underpinned by tenets of sustainability, kind of reuse and restoration and such. Maybe you can share kind of the challenges you've had as a developer from a design perspective, essentially. There's only so many of these projects you can have, but how you're kind of taking new projects from the ground up and using kind of the heritage around those cities that have it, and how you're leveraging that.
So for Alila Biome, first of all, thank you, Hal, for having me here. and my name is Coca. I'm from Kiana Corporation. So we're working on our actually second hospitality project. We've been focusing on our residential projects in Saigon, and this, besides the Marriott in Cam Ranh, the Alila Phuing is going to be the second hospitality project that we're working on. And even though we're not with the Alila design, we're not taking an old building and retrofitting them into something new, so a new project. We are still practicing the heritage hospitality because we are getting inspired by the Vietnamese vernacular architecture. So we're taking inspirations from the local fishing village, and we're taking the stilt villas, which are found in a lot of regions in Vietnam. And when Rita Amelou, our architectural designer, he proposed to have that as a feature for our project, just in some of the villas, we actually, as a developer, thought that it was a very good idea to promote the culture, the heritage of Vietnam into this project. So we actually decided to make all villas, the stilt villas, and also the rest of the public accommodation buildings, such as like the reception, the restaurant, the cultural center, be also on stilts, which actually brings up the construction cost a little bit because everything is going to be elevated on a platform. But we also thought that it would be a good idea because we don't have to do any heavy earthwork and also less impact on the landscape. We want to preserve the natural landscape as pristine, as natural as possible. We're also working with a sustainability consultant to try to get to the silver certification for EarthCheck, which is like LEED, but for resorts and hotels. So one of our criteria is that we're going to use mostly local materials. We're going to use light concrete blocks for most of our buildings, which made from fly ash, which is a byproduct from the coal production. It's actually 50. I knew this from doing this project, is that 50% of buildings in Vietnam have to be made from light concrete block, but there's like a study that only 30% of the buildings actually practice that that law, that code, the building code. So we commit to using that in our project, and also we're gonna experiment with materials such as like we have this beautiful coral reef in biome that in return we get a lot of these white coral, dead corals on the sand that we're gonna experiment in using that as a building material. Also, we're gonna source stone from the local region, and yeah, so we're just very committed to practicing the sustainable design in our projects.
Do you think the next generation of travelers, including those in Vietnam, do they find appeal in all the investment and effort you're making into these kind of values?
Yes, so of course we're all doing all these things as a developer because we want to be a force for good in the travel industry, but we're also looking from a developer perspective, like how is this gonna bring return to our investment? And we know that there is a surge of young tourists who are of the millennials and also Gen Z generation who are going to be making enough money to pay like $500 or more for a night at a resort or hotel. So yeah, I think that especially with after COVID, there's going to be a new surge of these conscious and also concerned consumers who are thinking that they want to travel, but they also want to be conscious of the decision, how traveling is gonna affect the world and the earth. So yeah, I think to answer your question, that we find that there is a demand in that.
Good. And
for sustainability luxury.
Sure. And hopefully, especially after the borders open, we'll continue that trend. Sylvia, I wanted to ask you another question too. Unfortunately, one of our friends, we're actually all mutual friends, Zhang Zung, she's unable to join us today, but she would have been calling from Hong Kong. And the question I'll pose to you, Sylvia, because you're just as experienced as a traveler as Zhang is, in places like Hong Kong and Singapore, you have so much heritage sites, not only in hotels that are meant for private use, but also public spaces. One of my favorite ones in Hong Kong, for example, is the police married quarters. You know, it used to be an old facility for the military police, I believe, but it's now transformed into this beautiful retail space. And of course, you can put a nice tower there and probably make a lot more money, but it also kind of is a way to drive tourism activity into Hong Kong. It's like one of those institutional places. And I'll ask the same question to you later, Coca, as well. Sylvia, in your experience, you know, in your travels, you've been all over Europe, you've lived in Europe and the US and whatnot. Do you see there being space and inspiration for kind of these public spaces in Vietnam to drive tourism, not just hotels, but you know, public spaces that drive tourism? We'd love to hear kind of your comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Hao. I just love the way like you literally just sparked, right? When you talk about this inspiration from Hong Kong that was, you know, a piece of the traveling history or memory. And obviously, you know, in my travels, I also see a lot of that in countries that has been mentioned before by Michael from the Unesco. You know, Singapore and Thailand does amazing job, you know, in preserving and working with the public spaces. You know, trying to somehow tell a story. And also, I think in hospitality sector, you can also see examples from hotel brands. For example, Indigo from ISG. You know, they really try to focus on how to bring the cultural story into the living space and put the local culture in the spotlight. And you know, in terms of inspirations, you know, when I travel, I think, and I promise I'm not sponsored, but I think we cannot fail to mention Italy because, you know, as you know, I got engaged in Italy. It has a huge space in my heart because when you really live somewhere and people preserve and are proud of their culture, you feel it, you live it, and you know that sense of pride, you know, comes from everywhere that and everything that they do. You know, when you walk around Italy, you remember that Leonardo da Vinci might have walked the steps. You think about the Medici families and the stories that that were told, and all of this brought a lot of not just inspiration but questions to me when I go back to Vietnam. How to transfer that pride? You know, how do we talk about this topic in a way that you know, make everyone in Vietnam just equally proud, right? Italian people are immensely proud about their products, their culture, their history. How do we make Vietnamese people equally as proud? And you know, our history goes so much deeper than just, you know, the French heritage and what the world knows about us. It goes so much beyond the bonjour at the Metropole Hotel in Hanoi. Because Vietnam is a country of, you know, 2,000 years old, and I just came back from a trip to Chang'an not so long ago, and I think that there's so much that we can still share, we can still talk about, and you know, in my travel, right, I also am usually a host to many friends visiting Vietnam. You know, for example, I remember the shoe designer, Christian Louboutin. He was collecting scrap pieces of papers from everywhere that we go, trying to make a scrap shoe at the end of the year for a special collection. Or architects like Bill Bensley, you know, he's obsessed with the local patterns so that he could put all of them, you know, into the M Gallery Sapa. So I think, you know, all these inspirations, and also by just meeting people who are purely, you know, fascinated by all aspects of culture, makes people like me wonder, how can we replicate the same talk, you know, within the Vietnamese community? Because we're talking about, you know, merging business and culture, and, you know, the cross activities between countries, government, academics, and we have a lot of resources that we need. And the resources here is not just money, I think. it is also the mindset and the attention towards this topic of heritage preservation that we're all trying to talk about. So all in all, I think to answer your question, I think that one of the key takeaway I want to highlight from all my travel and want to bring it to Vietnam is how to be absolutely proud of your country and every single aspect of it. You know, and in hospitality, they do it so well because they don't do it just in the high-end hotels. In Singapore and Thailand and many other countries, you see the integration into the lower-end hotels as well. And that's the true integration of hospitality and culture, in my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you, Sylvia. We're actually going to go to Q&A just because we want to keep things a bit on time. I know everyone's got busy schedules today. So big thanks for that. We're going to open to Q&A. We have a couple online, but also can open it up to 1 or 2 questions here in person. Questions from anybody? Luis, yeah. Let's go ahead. Your voice is...
Buildings. Thank you. So the question is essentially, as these developers that are talking about restoring buildings, there's always this kind of balance between operator and developer, where as an operator, we see that a new building is sometimes better from functionality and process. So how do you sign on certain operators saying that you're restoring a building versus a new building? Help me understand why you would defer to a restoration build versus a new build.
Maybe, Sylvia, did you hear that question?
Yeah.
I think maybe you're most relevant for this one. I'd love for you to answer that one.
Yeah, I think I'll give this a very, very short answer because the answer is, you know, it's very clear because nowadays all projects are dying to have a story, right? If you're building a new piece of land, for example, the JW Marriott Phu Quoc, you know, they have to create a story of a school in order to engage people to come. So if you have a restored building, for example, the upcoming Capella in Hanoi, for example, you can actually lean on the history and the heritage of that building to create a story that people want to be in. And I think that's also the reason why I love hospitality, because it's like a stage where you can almost create and spark the imagination. So it actually, I think, make the value of the building a lot higher.
That's a great answer. Maybe Coca, you can answer that too. I mean, your family has 2 projects and all these residential buildings, and most of them are all new, pretty much. How do you guys think about the story when you're building these projects and pursuant to kind of what Luis is saying?
Our residential projects in Saigon are actually all new builds. So we haven't done any kind of adaptive reuse or restoration projects yet, but so to answer actually your last question about my challenges as a designer, how I can convince these developers to, from my design point of view, to convince them to preserve these old buildings, that we have these beautiful houses on Le Loi that we wanted to actually turn them into like a cafe that preserve the architecture, something that people can actually come and you know, appreciate the architecture, the old French architecture, instead of just tearing it down and building in something new. I have the conversation with my family and also people from the past generation. What they told me is that they rather just tear it down and build into a new building that has the same beautiful French architecture, is because they think of that, they look at that old house and they think of the past, and they think of that harsh time that they went through, and they think of the war. So for our young generation, we look at these old buildings and we actually feel nostalgic, and we look, you know, we feel that it's a place of belonging for our heritage and then our culture. But for the older generation, they don't feel that way. So I actually thought about how to convince developers or the older generation to preserve these old buildings is that the way you talk to them, to develop a conversation like why we feel the way we are about old architecture, and also to listen to them and understand where they're coming from that, like they have a bad memory or they have a bad experience with that time of their life that they don't want to keep it. So I think the solution to preserving the heritage and old architecture is that we establish a conversation.
So it's very emotional in that sense too. Ken, we have only time for one more question, unfortunately. Ken.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I want to say how enlightening it is to listen to Sylvia and Coca on those views. I've been a bit out on the limb for the last few years. I've always said from the day I arrived in Hanoi in 1989 that it's just such a fantastic opportunity to preserve the heritage of Hanoi. And it's this fine balance. Well, there are two things to it, I think. It's the fine balance between we want to develop and therefore we need high-rise buildings. But the point you made is, in my experience, Vietnamese never want to look back. They only want to look forward. And therefore, it comes back to education, particularly in schools. We should be proud of our heritage. We should not be ashamed that, you know, we were governed by the French for so many years, or the American War. I mean, these are things that happened, and we should embrace what happened, and we should move on, but preserve the heritage of the country. So we need more people like you, younger generation, that start to look at that, and I think it starts with education.
Thank you for that insight, Ken. Okay, we'll have one more question. It looks like this gentleman back here really wants to ask, so then we'll pass it forward.
Yes, my question is about, as a practicing architect, I would like to know that because almost all around the world, the heritage protection is a part of a national program. So how is your collaboration here with the government? Do you have any legal background dealing with this heritage protected buildings, or do you have any real protection on the heritage? And actually, are they supporting you as doing this? I think the support from the government in this kind of question is very important.
I think we actually touch upon that topic later in today's conference, and it's something we should definitely talk about, because it's not just through the private sector, it's also through the public sector that needs to drive a lot of these things. And we precisely have a seminar or a topic about that later this afternoon, so we'll save it for then. I hope you don't mind. To keep things on track, we're going to move things forward. Thank you so much to our panel, Gerard, Sylvia, and Coca, for sharing a very emotional and very insightful from a younger generation perspective about this topic. Thank you again. Up next, we have Mauro Gasparati. I've never said your last name, so
you actually got it right.
I got it right? Okay, good. So Mauro, he is a director at Savills. He's going to be touching upon a topic about new trends for a sustainable future. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I start by saying I have a different microphone because I'm not as good as Dante to just stand with one single microphone. I'm Italian and I move my hand. That's the only things that I do. All right, so I think we have, is that okay, the volume, everything? Great. So I think we have 15, 20 minutes. I'll touch a little bit more into what is going to happen in the hospitality. And this is a question that I've been asked many times. What is next? Now, in a lot of cases, this year is what is going to happen next year, so 2021 into the hospitality. But what we'll see today is really looking at 5 to 10 years plan. So what is going to change in the hospitality industry and how we link this to the topic today. Now, to bring the discussion into what's going to change in the future, we always need to use what I define as megatrends. This is everything that is happening around us, the way we live, they're changing the way we live, the way we work, the way definitely we travel. And we only take 4 within the hospitality industry, which are changing everything: technology, consumer behavior, demographic, and transportation. Starting from technology, sometimes we just do the whole webinar or the whole workshop into this. Is changing the way we travel. It's making much easier, much faster, and much more personalized the traveling. But it's not only changing the way we travel, it's changing the way we operate hotel with this all sensor building and the way we construct hotel. So this is bringing a lot of change into the industry. The second part of the changing is coming from the demographic shift. Middle class, we know this large boom in the middle class, especially in Vietnam, especially in Asia. We are going to see a lot of family travels. We are going to see much higher income spending going into travel. The second bigger trend is a senior population, which will be a considerable amount of people in the next year. This one is opening a lot of opportunity to developer to really target this as a group, as well as the traveler. And they actually are coming as the biggest traveler. The biggest growth of a single solo travelers last year was the silver nomads, which are the people semi-retired that they just want to experience life that haven't seen it before. Then, of course, millennia, as we know, big part of the population and absolutely a big travelers, that they all require a different type of building, they require different type of service. It's all about social media, it's all about sharing, it's all about groupie type of travelers. So all of them are opening to a lot of a very different opportunity for developer. Transportation is also changing a lot. We see how connectivity between the various cities are changing. So make it much easier for people to reach the destination and much cheaper. Consider that half of the cost of the usual vacation is the transportation. So this cost is going to come down. But what we'll discuss a little bit more today is the change in consumer behavior, which is impacting a lot the way we design hotel and the way the people travel. Now we are moving away from buying expensive goods into buying experience. We start to use money to buy memory. Now this is a very bad news for the luxury business. So if you're selling watch, if you're selling car, you probably start to worry. But if you work in hospitality, which is all about experience, it's actually pretty good news to build on this kind of trend. What is happening? This is happening. So we start to move away from seeing business and leisure to see really different type of category of travelers. So we start to talk about silver noble, tech, last minute, leisure, eco-warrior. Those are the category that hotels now are moving to target. And as a result of this change, hotels are being changed. We don't talk about anymore of 3, 4, and 5 star. We start to classify hotel as those. So we start to talk about posh-tel, wellness resort, branded residence, selective service hotel. This is all the change that we start to experience slowly, but it will be faster and faster. As a result of this, operator actually start to need more brands. Before there was some mentioning into the operator approach, there was a question into the operator. All of them, we've seen them buying company and buying brands in the last few years just because they need more. It's not only buying new brand, but it's also launching new brand. There was a few mention of the ING new brand targeting specifically design hotel. So all this trend, it's coming to us. And Vietnam has been big embracer of this. This is the number of new brands that we are expecting in the next 2 or 3 years. So Vietnam has welcomed all of this, welcome change, and been embracing all this mega trend. So out of every country, we are actually in a pretty good position to see this mega trend coming. But let's look at back, what is experience? What actually is the experience that I'm talking about? Now, in some case, people travel looking for adrenaline, maybe looking for something to learn, maybe looking for a new boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever make you travel and looking for experience. But in the majority of the case, experience is actually connection to the local people. You pretty much know those 2 pictures taken in Vietnam by well-known people. This is a connection with the country. This is connecting with the culture of the country. This is connecting with the history of the country. And this is when hospitality and heritage come together. Those are probably 3 of the pillars of both of them coming and sharing and opening up to the opportunity, the history of the country, the culture of the country, and of course, the nature. We all know Vietnam is rich of those three things, especially the history, especially the lot of beautiful place. I think it's one of the most exclusive UNESCO offering. But what we also know is that Vietnam is a full of experience. Wherever you go, you'll find. And the first experience is actually true, is how you cross the street. We all been there, first time arriving in Vietnam, how the hell you go to the other side? That's the first experience that you probably face. But a lot of them are actually unexpected. They are not planned, they just happen to be there. And this one, nobody was expected that it could be such a sensation and helping the country to actually be seen as a cool destination to go. But what are the opportunities? I think here there are a few developers here and they're all probably asking, okay, Mauro, how do I make this working? Before there was a bit of discussion into how you mix up the spending, the higher spending that you see in a wellness or in sustainability to the return on investment. Now, there are two ways. There is the bad way and there is the good way. So we all know that some developers just don't do it right. Now, this one, for example, I'm sorry for the camera because I'll try to stay more still. I use on purpose foreign country, but I guarantee you there are a lot of examples like this in Vietnam where there's no really regard for the nature, for the culture, they just been developing, coming. But also a lot of good example of how developer or single investor are helping the tourism and the destination. We all know in Da Nang how this single piece of art, if you like, had helped the destination to be seen. The Anantara train, which is helping the connection between province, that it would be very difficult to experience the luxury. They are bringing luxury into the countryside. But also something like in Sapa, this project called Topaz that has helped Sapa to be seen as a luxury destination and embrace the nature into it. There are other ways that people are somehow leveraging on this, this heritage type of trends. So this one is a work of not one single developer, but a lot of small business owner, which will all come together and they just deliver something that was there before. Another way we discussed it a few times before was the connection with the nature. Vietnam, lot of national park, lot of hot spring. So somehow this is another great way that developers are able to embrace all this mega trend in wellness and they're able actually to embrace this and to make money, if you like. Before there was a question on why I should build something like that. Well, you probably charge much more, around $1,000 per night last year. This one will probably around 200, and this one is in Cambodia. This is a Bill Bensley ownership, and it's probably another $2,000 or $3,000 per night. So you actually, people are willing to spend more to embrace the nature. Of course, religion is another big thing. We know in Italy, we have a lot of monastery that is being converted. So this is a big thing in Europe. In Vietnam could also be something that you look at. This is the M Gallery connection where you really embrace the history and the religion of a country into something that the client will pay more for. But probably the most common things to see this sort of conversion of an heritage into something that deliver an additional experience is the history. You know the Sofitel legend in the Sofitel Metropole, you know the Continental Sagol, Dalat has his own things, but really Asia is full of examples of historical buildings that are delivering this additional experience and history. But the good things into hospitality, that things are also changing, things are moving ahead and allowing people to have even more option to actually embrace mega change. This is in Italy, and Luigi asked me to actually take it as a case study. This is Albergo Diffuso. It's a way that Italy is giving a bit of life back to some of the province or the small town where nobody go to visit anymore because somehow the infrastructure are not there. There is a few examples of this, not just building a single things, but taking what is an existing town and making it the whole experience for a lot of people. So to answer the question I was starting with, I don't have the right answer, but what I know, that everybody, it does have this opportunity to be embraced. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mauro. We're going to move to the second panel today, which is kind of a extension of Mauro's discussion, which is about heritage and hospitality, new trends for a sustainable future. So we'd like to invite Neha Pandey to the stage, Ken Atkinson, Vi Vu, and Doc Nguyen. I'm just going to be setting up here quickly. I'll quickly do introductions as well, so we can save a bit of time. We'll start with Doc Nguyen. So he works at Aspire Company. He's the co-founder and investment director. It's a relatively new company, actually. They're several $100 million fund. That's kind of one of their LPs is a U.S. pension fund. They're investing in a lot of restoration projects, new builds, in co-living. So Doc will ask some questions for him. Vi Vu is the CFO of Son Kim Land. But like many other Vietnamese developers, they've done a lot of big projects, but they're also doing kind of smaller ones, which we'll discuss. Neha Pandey, she's the marketing director at Sun Group, which is kind of responsible for projects like the JW in Phu Quoc and Intercontinental in Da Nang. And of course, Ken Atkinson, he's been a big advocate for tourism in Vietnam. He is, I believe, one of the directors at Vietnam Tourism Board. I'm sure he has a lot of insights to share as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. Can we get a microphone up here too? Anyways, so we're going to start with the first question here, and it's for Neha and Ken. So they've obviously not only traveled extensively, but they've done some work on projects that are heritage related. And I'll start with Neha here. We'd love to hear about your experience at Raffles, Singapore. So really beautiful project right in the middle of Singapore, heritage building. What did the owners and developers see in this opportunity for them to kind of invest in that infrastructure? We'd love to hear from your experience.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here today and talk about this very important topic and how, to your point, I had the opportunity, of course, to work as the regional director for Asia Pac for Fairmont Raffles, which was part of FRHI at that point, and then they got acquired by Accor. And it was interesting because the transition happened at a time when, as developers and owners, we were looking at working on the Raffles project and on the hotel, which is a national monument. It is an iconic property, and of course, it's a flagship Raffles hotel. Everybody clearly associates it as a signature landmark for the city-state. And we were trying to figure out how do we go about restoring this property, which is at this point 133 years old. It's been a hotel for 133 years old. The structure itself has been around. It was built back in the 1830s. And it was actually built by the Sarkis brothers, who built it out as a beach home with just 10 bedrooms. That's what it was meant to be. And then it eventually got converted to a hotel. And as part of the restoration, the idea was how do we refresh and restore the hotel without losing the essence? Of course, there's a lot that we couldn't do with the physical structure itself because it is a heritage monument. At the same time, we were trying to figure out how do we monetize all the spaces within a very large complex because it is spread over a fairly large amount of area, a lot of which wasn't necessarily utilized to its fullest because of many restrictions at that point in time when the hotel conversion and restoration happened back in 91. So it hadn't been touched. The structure hadn't been refreshed except for some interiors, of course, being refurbished for a long time. And the idea was, how do we make sure the public spaces, as well as the restaurants and the suites, because this is an old suite hotel, it's being sold at usually the ADR of $1,000 a night. So of course, the experience itself is extremely bespoke. Every suite comes with its own butler service, and the guests coming in expect very personalized service to be delivered. So we were like, how do we ensure that the same experience and the same essence in terms of the brand identity and the product and the property itself and the amount of history that it has is still delivered to the guests. And that essentially also meant how do we kind of leverage a lot of the extra spaces we had available, because we moved from 103 suites to 117 suites by the time the restoration was completed. And the idea was to make sure every single space, and especially F&B and banqueting, was really optimized to its fullest degree, because there is this beautiful space, I think over 5,000 square meters, called the Jubilee Hall, which was kind of set up as a theater style, because it used to be a little bit of a performance arena when it was originally built. How do we kind of convert that into a more usable meeting space or banqueting space? Because it had these fixed chairs in there. So there was a lot of work that went into every single touch point. And of course, there was a huge amount of work that was put in by Alexandra Champalamo. She was the key interior designer who worked on that. But as owners and developers, the idea was, how do we not basically mess with any of the actual there's no way we could mess with the structure, but how do we make sure that we don't lose a lot of the history with the hotel? Especially, for example, some of the restaurants. There's the Tiffin Room, which has been serving North Indian cuisine at the hotel since the early 1900s. So how do we kind of refresh that, make it look fantastic, bring in new chefs, bring in new F&B concepts, but not really take away from the background and the stories and the history that was so rich about it.
So it sounds like all the time it goes back to the keeping the story, leveraging the story, maximizing the story to really convince the owners and developers at this point to continue investing in these projects. We'd love to pass it on to Ken as well. Ken, you've obviously had a lot of experience, not only in Vietnam, but pan-regionally, projects like the Rosewood Yangon, potentially you can comment on. Going off what Neha mentioned, maybe you could share some kind of experiences you've had about that topic as well.
Yeah, so let me say, I'm not directly involved with the Rosewood in Yangon, but Luigi organized a heritage conference there, which I attended and had the privilege of looking around the property before it actually opened. But I have been in Asia for 42 years, and I've watched history disappear before my eyes. And I think the best example of that was actually Singapore, where everything that was old, apart from the raffles, was actually bulldozed into the ground, and then they started to appreciate the benefit of it. So we have all these recreated areas in Singapore, where they've recreated what actually they could have preserved in the first place.
Do you think those recreated spaces have contributed to Singapore's rise as a tourism hub as well? And are there numbers behind that in your experience?
I don't know what the numbers are, but I mean, I've visited a lot of those places, and well, certainly they were very well frequented, and I think it does add that other dimension to Singapore that had been destroyed and was actually missing. But I'm speaking as an old guy and one of the silver hair brigade that Mauro referred to, so younger generation. But as I say, there always seems to be full of young people, and obviously people in Singapore have the lifestyle and the purchasing power that they can afford to go to those places. But going back to the Rosewood, so I think every city in Asia has a heritage hotel, and if we look at Hong Kong, Singapore, the Raffles, we've got the Raffles in Phnom Penh, and Vietnam, of course, has the Sofitel Metropole in Hanoi, and that was one of the smart moves that was made, and it does attract tourism. There's no doubt about it that people want to go to cities with history, and they're prepared to pay the price for staying in one of these old hotels, legendary hotels. And it helps put the country, helps put the city, and it helps put the country on the map as far as foreign investment is concerned. So I'm a great believer that you preserve the history. And as I said earlier, it's great to hear younger generation people actually thinking that way now, because I think there's too many cities in Asia where that has not been at the forefront of the thinking.
Thank you for the insight, Ken. And moving along to kind of a younger company with younger ambitions in relation to customer audience. Again, Duc is the investment officer at Aspire. It's a new fund that's launched that's, I think, acquired 7 or 8 buildings already, most of them kind of older ones, especially neighborhoods that are quite historical. Duc, I'd love to hear your comment about what your guys' strategy is in relation to building acquisition, because from what I understand, you're looking to acquire 50 buildings in the next decade, restore them. Some of them are built from the ground up. How does like restoring buildings and looking for specific characteristics kind of dictate your group strategy?
First of all, thanks for having me here. Very, very exciting. I think I bring a perspective from our company is fairly different from what we have seen. What previously we seen is in tourism industry mostly. Our company actually work in the long-term accommodations business. So people stay with us for a long time. You're talking about year, 2 years, maybe, I hope, for 5 or 10 years.
Right?
Yeah, yes. Co-living or even the so-called share accommodations or even long-term accommodations. So what we did is due to the structures, right? We focus a lot on the CBD of Ho Chi Minh, which is very exciting because you see the culture, the differences, not of the city as a whole. You see in neighborhood. Neighborhoods are different from each other. They are not the same. They have different characteristics, different people living in there. And so when we build them and we develop them, we cannot just be cookie cutters, right? And if you do that, you lose the soul of the neighborhood that you actually working so hard to investing in, right? So back to your questions, development versus renovations. Well, it's in Ho Chi Minh. I can only speak from Ho Chi Minh because we have been refocusing on the city for the last few years. It has been a challenges, right? And one of them is that the city itself, just to answer the gentleman's over there, just the questions, right? Our historic buildings in neighborhoods have been disappearing at the fastest speed I've ever seen in my life. And you see that villas you've seen, people just left it there, right? And it just rot. And at one point of time, you are like, you cannot restore them. Literally, you cannot restore them. They're falling apart. And so the only thing you can do is just to maybe bring some remnants of it to put in your new buildings. And that's one of the experience that we have is that the building was just so worn down. We can't do anything. We spend months and months trying to do something, but we can't. The previous owners left it there for years. So what can you do, right? And so what we did was we bring some remnants to remind you of the story before that. So that's what was one of the way you can still do it without actually keeping it because it's not possible. And one of the projects that we do is renovations, right? Building in Vietnam, in our scales, we call it very small scale. So we can do anything from 50 rooms up to 100 rooms. So 50 rooms for accommodation is not that big. Seriously, it's not big. And some of them can be very inefficiently designed. And as Sylvia and Coca discussion before, it can be very efficiently designed. The owners basically just built it and not thinking of the tenants at all. So you have to redesign it. You have to twist it around. You have to make some changes. So the common thing of renovation and developments are that they are very unique, and you just cannot the challenges you just cannot tell between the two. Each project in working in the CBD is different. And you just have to adapt to it. You just have to develop a framework to adapt to them. So that's what we did.
Excellent. I'm not getting sponsored with this either, but Aspire is a company to watch. They're opening a co-living brand called Belong. Lots of CBD properties for co-living, obviously a new concept that's on the rise. So yeah, talk to him if you're interested in leasing a long-term apartment. So thank you, Doug. We're gonna pass it on to Vivu. So she again is the CFO of Sonkim Land. They're most well-known for obviously projects in Tutiam, Empress Tower and the CBD, but they also do a few historical things. There's limitations as we've discussed throughout this whole seminar. V's mentioned to me before the seminar, a lot of their projects are rooted in heritage and a lot of their showrooms are kind of rooted in that as well. And then they also have some in retail and F&B, which she'll explain. V, my question for you is, why do you guys do that? Why, you have all these beautiful villas in Phu Quoc Quang and Dien Bien Phu. Why do you guys keep that as centers for the first point of engagement for your customers when it comes to real estate?
Thank you, Hao, and thank you everyone for inviting me here. Yeah, coming from Sonkim Land, actually this seems to be for my chairman, the founder of the company, rather than me, because all you have been saying is from him, not me. Actually, I've learned from him a lot. So we randomly that we have, when you invite me to this seminar, I think that, we haven't done any big thing in terms of these, but when I look around all the show flat, all the property we built, it has more or less these kind of features where, for example, the Nasim show flat, where is located on Phung Ka Quang, a diplomatic area. I heard that villa lasts for 100 years, and when we build a show flat, our partner Hong Kong Land also very care about this kind of heritage culture, and they say that no, we cannot break the building, and of course the regulation why we cannot do that. We have to maintain the feature, the culture of the building, the design, the old feature, old design, even the tile. You come to the show flat, you still see it's black and white tile, but it creates a style of the show flat.
Hello, hi everybody. We're gonna restart in about 1 minute. So we'd love for everybody to get back into the seminar room. Thank you. One minute. Thank you, everybody. For those joining us virtually, we'll be restarting in a couple minutes. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, everyone, for making your way back into the seminar room. We're going to kickstart the second session of this afternoon with Luigi. I'll make a proper introduction when everyone's coming in. He's very, very eager to start the second session. We're going to wait a little bit. We're not going to start without an empty room. His topic will be about sustainable development of tourism in Ho Chi Minh City. A very exciting topic. He has some cool examples to showcase today. So please do make your way back into the room. So just as a brief introduction before Luigi takes the stage, Luigi is the CEO of Asia Pacific for SCE Projects. It's quite a distinguished architect firm based in Milan, Italy. Luigi is in charge of their not Italian operations, their Asia operations. They've done a number of projects throughout Asia, but they're based here, headquarters in Ho Chi Minh City. So without further ado, Luigi, we'd love for you to take the stage and talk about your session here about the Saigon Golden Square. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. In particular, I would like to thank you, Dante Brandi, the Consul General of Italy, and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for making this happen. Thank you so much. Grazie. And I want to thank Vietcetera for the great work that they've done to organize this conference. Okay, so today I will present a project that we done a few months ago, which was actually a competition, and was one of the side effects of some of our conference that has been done in the last few years. This heritage preservation initiative, as mentioned by Dante in the beginning, it's It's actually the Italian initiative towards Southeast Asia to somehow show a new way of development, something that in Italy and also in other European countries, particularly UK, and has been driven for the development in the last 20 years, especially. So please, the slide. Oh, okay. Okay. So this proposal for sustainable development of tourist sector in Ho Chi Minh City, so we call Saigon on the Square. It's our idea to define a project. Just a quick introduction about our company. SCE Project, it's a global architecture and engineering firm based in Milano, with branches office in Rome, Los Angeles, Ho Chi Minh, and Singapore. So we do pretty much everything actually. So not only hospitality, but let's say that hospitality is one of our main strengths. And this is some of the major projects that we've done in the past related to heritage and hospitality. For example, the renovation of the Four Seasons in Milan, the Mandarin Oriental extension in Milan. The secretariat in Yangon is still ongoing. We are in charge of a couple of wings that's supposed to be a museum, and the Eden Hotel in Rome, which is a wonderful property belonging to Dorchester Collection, and ultimately the San Pellegrino Cursal Hotel. Okay, so I think everybody knows where is Ho Chi Minh, but as architect, we have to start from the map. And you can see Ho Chi Minh City, the location in South Vietnam. And in particular, we're talking about the city center, so District 1. This is the panoramic of the site. So as I mentioned before, this project is coming from a competition that has been organized by the local government at the beginning of this year. And the competition concerned the creation of pedestrian zones in Le Loi, and also the integration of an underground commercial facility in between the level 0 of Le Loi and the subway that is under construction. So for the benefit of those who are not familiar with Ho Chi Minh City, this location has been the city center since Saigon has been actually built, and later Phuc Thien maybe can explain more about this. But the key point of this project is actually the restoration of Benta Market. I think everybody knows Benta Market. It's not a great heritage in terms of architecture, but is probably the most important building in the city. I think every Vietnamese knows Benta Market, and even outside Vietnam, despite the condition, everybody knows Benta Market. A little bit of history. So when we start a project, this is a very Italian way of working. We always do historical analysis, no matter if it's heritage building or not. And part of the analysis is important because from the history, you can actually get information and and ideas that actually you can implement in your project. Then very important is to understand the location where we are. We are in Saigon. Seems obvious, but what are the characteristics of Saigon? Saigon is congested. There is already a big contrast between the new and old buildings. You can see that because despite the destruction that has been carried out, there is still something left that we hope that to keep and give a new life. Rivers and canals. Saigon is built on the water, and then we have very interesting, narrow and densely populated street vendor. These are characteristics that actually made the city and must be part of the project, at least in my humble opinion, because if you want to build a destination, as Mauro mentioned also early, it's important to convey the characteristic of the site. So this is the current condition of the area. I think everybody knows it's not brand new. Unfortunately, there is no big effort from investors or government at the moment to preserve buildings. But the fact that we are here today and we see a lot of people interested, it's already a big encouraging things. And especially here before the new generation of developer, the idea is really, really great. There is also another relevant building in this area, which is the Saigon Railway building, that actually has been also part of this project, of course, to consider adaptive reuse. So seeing the context, the message is that the past can be the inspiration for the future. So this scheme show how, in a plastic way, showing the overlapping of the old city. You can see the silhouette of the Opera House, the Cathedral, Benta Market, and no other relevant building, the Ho Chi Minh government office. So all these are characteristics that need to be taken in account in the language that later will be used by the architect for this type of project. And the combination of the old and new, of course, need to consider and take in account the needs of 2020, because yes, we have to restore the building, but we leave the present and we leave the future. Therefore, looking the buildings only as a museum or something that you put under the glass, it's not the best way to conserve, because the building need to be alive in order to continue its purpose. And then there is also another important fact that is coming out recently and very strongly, which is the implementation of smart city. So how to, let's say, put together the new and the old, but the new, it's not only a new building, we're also talking about a new technology. So the implementation of new technology can definitely help in conserve buildings, in convey message for people that actually are interested in this topic and they want to discover experience of the culture, but in a modern way as well. These are benefits of the heritage preservation adaptive use. There are several, these we only listed a few, but the benefits are from the social point of view, the economic point of view, management point of view, and safety as well. Safety in Vietnam is not a big issue like in other countries in this region, but people tend to forget that Europe also had similar condition in the 50s or the 60s after the war. City center progressively being abandoned, especially in the 50s and 60s, because the needs after the war was to build cheap and fast, and of course the suburb was the ideal condition, and this generated several issues in safety in a city center. So I remember when I was a kid in Milano in the 80s, go to the Milano Central Station was absolutely a threat. And now instead, after renovation that has been carried out years ago, it's one of the best places to go actually with the family even. And this happening in Vietnam is not happening because there are different conditions, but I can mention, and later hopefully we have our friend Francesco Siravo from Penang, he can elaborate more. But for example, a city like Kuala Lumpur have serious issues in safety in the city center, because the original city center, the historical city center, has been abandoned basically, and now you have a social condition that is not really nice. So what are the strategies to implement a smart city and of course in prospective heritage preservation? First of all, we're talking about renovation of the built environment. So theoretically any building can be restored. And there are many ways, there are many technologies that are available now that actually you can save pretty much 100% of the existing structure. The second is to create resilient and self-sufficient cities. We've seen what's happened in the beginning of the pandemic. Many cities ran out of stocks, and that's because everybody rely on international trade, and therefore when there is a problem, we've seen what's happened. And these also have a lot related with the planning of the city. The third strategy is to implement capacity building as smart hub. Later, I will explain more about this. But basically, we're talking about the implementation of mixed-use building that not only serve the private investor, but also serve the community. And fourth, and probably the most important, is to combine tradition and innovation. So when we're talking about the experience in smart, we call smart and creative city. Sorry, I forgot to mention, the director of UNESCO in the very beginning explained the concept of creative city network. We actually get inspiration from that because I believe it's a very good initiative. Rather than have another award, UNESCO is trying to propose the city in this region a new sustainable way of development that include also the restoration and renovation of building. In that sense, it's important to include the community. So the project should not only have commercial value, because the value of the project it's given by the people. Therefore, it's important to engage people, and the buildings should have exchange, teaching, share knowledge, and even coaching citizens. I've seen in China a very good example years ago that there was initiative also in education in that sense. And then this can create that human environment that actually will make the city a richer place. When we're talking about implementing capacity building a smart hub, it's not really new. It's just a new definition of a mixed use. In a sense, we call hybrid buildings. And those buildings are supposed to be more integrated with the environment in the city and have better functionality, and need to consider also the operation costs. That's one of the most important aspects. People tend to see the problem of renovation as a cost, but I really like to challenge other consultant, architecture and engineering to show me the number, because in my experience, a renovation project has pretty much the same cost per square meter of a new. So, of course, if you're talking about volume of the building that is reduced, yes, that's true. But as mentioned before by the Alphanam Sylvia, the value is actually something that is given by the history, and therefore you can sell for higher price, just to be very straightforward. This is one example still in this project. We implement this new build that connect the subway station, and it's a very small building, but inside there are facilities that actually serve the community, such as incubator for new activities, sharing office, exhibition space, event space, meeting, conference. So it's a building that actually connect people, and that's actually something that with the new technology, theoretically, you can connect few of these buildings in one city that they talk to each other and they can work with each other. So what is Saigon Golden Square? This idea is to actually, we call it as a slogan. I mean, Benta Market in the past was a place for gold pawn and gold shop, even gold manufacture. And still now there is a little bit of those activities, although they moved in other districts. But the very beginning, Benta Market was pretty much the gold area. So we thought that this could be a slogan, because the idea to create a huge commercial area, of course, it's important to give a brand name that can be attractive towards, especially foreign visitors. And important, the integration of public space, new technologies and cultural activities, together with the renovation of heritage, of course. Okay, so let's go more in detail. This is the master plan, and you can see this is the Benta market, and of course has been not touched. Outside the building has to be preserved as much as possible, original. And then this is the actually railroad building that also will be converted in our plan. This is our project, is not the government, okay, just to be clear. And then our proposal was to basically create a very large pedestrian area in Leloy with urban, with green area in the middle, and exactly underneath this boulevard is still under construction the subway, the 2 lines that should go to serve the city in the next few years. And basically the yellow area, you can see it's representing the pedestrian. Of course, it's not entirely pedestrian, but that's actually what is lacking in a city like Saigon and other city in the region, where there is no pedestrian area and lack of public space that are integrated with new function and old function. Since it's very expensive to carry out such a big project, because we're talking about, if I remember correctly, 75 square meter, 75,000 square meter. We also propose to create in this corner over here a rise building that actually should pose to maximize GFA for the potential investor in order to have the possibility to maximize the investment. So this is the idea. This is the view. You can see the tower. Not that I like very much to build high-rise, but it's a fact that any investor need money and need to make money out of their investment, and therefore thinking that the government alone can carry out such a big project is utopistic. Is not happening even in Europe now, especially looking the economic condition post-COVID. Therefore, it's important to create a model of sustainable, also from the economic point of view, where there are new built that are for pure speculation, which is, there is nothing wrong, although the terminology is a bit, this is the speculation. And then this speculation that we calculate roughly in $2 billion US dollar value of speculation, this could theoretically feed most of the investment for this project. Of course, there's been criticism in this initiative because people told us that you block the view. Yes, true. But if you look the, for example, project done very recently in Japan by Kengo Kuma, which is one of the most important architects in the world, he renovated the Ginza. In Ginza, the opera house, the Kabuki house, actually they only kept the facade, and in the back they built 40 stories, and there is no whatsoever theater left, because the investment that is required, of course, is very high, and therefore it's important to also consider a new build. This is another view of the boulevard. Has been also implemented a canopy and some area that market can be happen, because the function of the Benta market will be untouched. So basically it's only a renovation project, and then there's been implemented also a basement. You can see from this section. This is a new basement that actually will double the GFA, commercial GFA. Currently, the Benta market is very crowded, as you know. Why is crowded? Because it's popular, the rent is very high, and therefore doubling the commercial size is it's pretty important to allow new tenants to come in and also to reorganize the space inside. So the idea was to create a fresh market and F&B outlet, Vietnamese style, let's say, on the ground floor, while on the basement, connected with the subway, it will be created like a modern shopping mall. And then also the implementation of a technical floor like for parking and facility infrastructure. This is the entrance of the subway station that will lead also to the shopping area. And this is the overall view that shows the tower is pretty tall. We're talking about 46 stories, and the height, of course, has been calculated, try to cater for the investment. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Luigi, for sharing this project about Benta Market. Hopefully we can implement that in the future. Moving next, we're gonna have a panel discussion with 4 experts that are developing or have developed similar projects or have knowledge about it. So we'd like to invite, well, we have 2 guests virtually today. We have Rose Lee, she's calling from New York. I believe it's like 1 in the morning there, so we'll wrap up this panel, she can go to sleep. We have Francesco, are you there? Yes, Saravo, he's also on the call. And then in person, we have 2 guests. We have Henry Bott, he's the chief representative of Swire. He'll be joining us as well. And then Phuc Tien, are you here? He is here. Yes, on the corner over here. So Francesco, conservation architect, Phuc Tien, Center Point Vietnam CEO, and Henry also chief representative. And Ross Lee, she's representing an association from the Philippines about this topic as well. Cool. Yeah, please take a seat, guys. We're going to start with our virtual guests, keeping in mind that Rosalie, she'd like to probably go to sleep at some point. We'll start with her. You know, this project that Luigi presented, big ambitions and would really revolutionize that space. In terms of going into practice, of course, there's some challenges there. Rose, I'd love for you to share about kind of what those hurdles look like from not only your perspective in the Philippines, you're given your expertise, but greater Southeast Asia. What do they face with these kind of projects in terms of challenge?
Okay, good morning from New York City, and thank you very much for inviting me. But before I talk about this topic, I just want to say a few words to entice you to invest in heritage tourism in the Philippines. The Philippines is a good place to invest in heritage tourism. We have a good variety of heritage buildings with good potential for adaptive use, from large former commercial buildings to smaller residential ones that can sometimes be grouped to form an ensemble. We have many spectacular beaches and natural scenery as backdrops for our heritage buildings. The local population is naturally very friendly and many are well educated, and English is commonly spoken. What's more, your dollar or euro will buy you much more in the Philippines. So check us out. Okay, so now to the topic at hand. Some of these challenges to adaptive use are obvious, but I listed 10 issues, and I'll just say just a sentence or two in the interest of time, a sentence or two about each one. The first one is, the first 2 ones are issues of compatibility. Number 1 is compatibility with the community. The choice of which heritage building to use and the use for that should be compatible with the community that surrounds it. Luigi already spoke about this, but I want to highlight it because you will want a project that the community would welcome and not fight against. This is very important for the community to be engaged with the project. The second compatibility item is compatibility of proposed use of the heritage building. One of the biggest factors affecting the success of an adaptive use project, in my experience as an architect and the buildings that I've done, the adaptive use projects that I've done, is this issue, the compatibility of the proposed use with the historic building. Sometimes the proposed use doesn't fit well with the original building, so much so that in the end, the outcome destroys that which made the building special. Okay, moving on to issue number 3, site access. The site in which the building is located should be very accessible by various modes of transportation. Unless it is a very high-end development where only some of them only private planes can go, and there's a few of those in the Philippines, the success of the project will be affected by the availability of the access to it. Number four, the size of the site. This is quite obvious, but needs to be said. The heritage building selected may be appropriate, but the site may not be large enough to accommodate support uses. In tight urban settings, there may not be enough area for amenities. So this is a big consideration. Number five is compliance with local building codes. Different countries have different building codes. Some are more strict than others. Unlike here in the United States, where there is a separate building code for heritage structures that take into account their special circumstances, very often in other countries, the same requirements for new buildings are imposed on the old buildings. And complying with these regulations may mean destroying the historic character of the building. In particular, codes related to structural requirements, where the old building is automatically classified as not as strong as a modern building. It takes specialized preservation training for structural engineers to be knowledgeable in how to assess the structural integrity of historic buildings. We are now recognizing this issue of training in the Philippines. Number six, the insertion of modern building systems. Modern life requires sophisticated mechanical, electrical, and technical systems to be installed in the restoration and adaptive use of heritage buildings. Working creatively with the historic fabric to insert these systems without destroying or being visually disruptive is often a challenge. Number seven, finding skilled design professionals and craftspeople. Some countries are fortunate to have maintained the continuity of their traditional building crafts through their history, through the ages. Building crafts are so much a part of their culture that there are always people who can still do ancient building crafts in their country. But many countries are not so lucky. So finding people to restore old building features such as decorative plaster, wall finishes, it may be a challenge. Number eight, availability of matching materials for restoration. There may not be original or even modern materials to match the old that are available for use in restoration. Some original materials may now be environmentally protected and not allowed to be harvested for use. Number nine, environmental issues. These include lead paint, asbestos, now that we know the danger to people's health that these materials cause. And lastly, number 10, energy retrofit. With mandates for green energy to save the planet due to climate change, retrofitting old buildings for higher energy efficiency, especially the building envelope, is a major challenge. But don't let the challenges prevent you from using heritage buildings. The rewards are great, and contributing to the preservation of culture and heritage is priceless. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose, from New York City, for sharing some of those tips. Let's hear about some of those in practice and what those rewards are. Francesco calling in, I actually don't know where you're calling in from, presumably Italy. If you can unmute yourself, Francesco. Francesco's going to talk about a case study in Point Penang in Malaysia. They were awarded the UNESCO status. Francesco, could you briefly share kind of some points learned from that experience?
Yes, indeed. I hope you can hear me.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, I'm actually calling from Penang. I've been working on Penang, on the historic area of Penang, which is called Georgetown, for quite some time. As you may know, the town was named World Heritage Site in 2008. And my first visit was in 2010, when we were kindly invited by the state government to, and the Think City, which is a parastatal organization, to discuss ways of moving forward with planning in respect to the nomination of a World Heritage Site, which we did, and we completed our proposal as Aga Khan Trust for Culture in 2014, and that was finally approved as a special area plan. And the next step has been the actual start of implementation. We implemented various projects which are now well on their way, which include an emphasis on public spaces, in particular a number of small town gardens, the seafront area, which is now being upgraded to become a seafront promenade with the construction of a new seawall. We worked on two very important buildings, one 19th century private residence, as well as a fort, Star Fort, which was built at the end of the 18th century by the British, the British colonizers who came here at that time. And so all of this has been taken a fair amount of time, but also gave us reasonable experience on building and facing a number of challenges. And Rose Lee has just mentioned some of them: the lack of specialized building industries that deal with traditional construction technologies, the lack of building materials that are appropriate, the constraints that are we have to face with respect to building regulations, which, as Rosalie said, are not really geared to traditional buildings. So all of these things we've gradually learned how to deal with, and we're beginning to also create more of an awareness in Georgetown about the needs and particularities of conservation planning and conservation of individual buildings. Now, one thing that to us was quite important is to go beyond the conservation of individual buildings and conservation of public open spaces to look at the issue of residential use. Now, I was very interested in what Mr. Atkinson said regarding Singapore. Singapore had a considerable amount of traditional buildings which have all but disappeared today. Well, this is not the case with Penang, where there is still a high percentage of traditional residential buildings. Now, they're not quite as appreciated as they should be. And in fact, the World Heritage Site boundary does not include a vast area of traditional buildings. And we're trying to see whether this would possibly become part of an extension of the World Heritage Site. This is important because we want to move away from a concept of historic area purely dedicated to tourists. This is one of the, the World Heritage Sites nomination are often a double-edged knife. In other words, yes, they bring attention to the quality of history and culture and special buildings, but on the other hand, they're also seen as a form of promotion for tourism. And often tourism kills the qualities and the character of these places. We could mention places like Barcelona or even Rome, that I know quite well, where tourism has essentially pushed away residential use and a lot of the character that these areas used to have. Now we need to be.
Francesco, sorry,
Yes.
we're kind of running out of time, so I'd like the other panelists to.
Well, that's essentially the message I wanted to share, that what we should strive for is continuity rather than transformation for the sake of itself. and happy to answer questions. And thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. We're going to move on to Phuc Tien. You know, we just got the example from Penang here. In Saigon, there's a number of landmarks that would help transform potentially Saigon to a UNESCO site. We'd love to hear from you.
Hello, I am Saigonese. That's why I think everyone live or grow up in Saigon. You must know well chợ Bến Thành, Market Square is a very exciting place. It's fully a heritage place. We just talk about Penang or somewhere in the world. I would say that Bến Thành Market Square is a very unique place. Maybe Lugi, we should not call it Saigon Square. We should call Saigon Golden Shoes, not Saigon Golden Square. It makes money. That's why be careful if you want to develop this area, because a lot of heritage, a lot of history, at least 2 years already. This area is the new development area of Saigon modern city after 1865. One thing I like to contribute that developer and investor not think about only the high rise around Bến Thành Market Square. I appreciate the idea. Think down, but top, do a lot thing in the underground of the square and the Bến Thành market. Make them more unique. And it's a new heritage. And perhaps if we compare with Penang or KL or somewhere in the world where they have the central market square like that, it makes Bến Thành Market Square could become a very unique. Yeah, it's my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to showcase an exciting project, not here in Vietnam, but Henry, he would love to do one in Vietnam and build one. So if you're interested in joining that effort, please talk to Henry after. We'd love to move on to the slides that Henry's provided about. Well, first off, introductions. Henry is the chief representative of Swire Group in Vietnam. It's a centuries-old company based out of Hong Kong. Really exciting stuff. They've just launched a joint venture here in Vietnam, but it's more on the residential side. Let's hear from him about some of these exciting projects they've done historically in the past, highlighting specifically Chengdu, Taikoo Li. So without further ado, here's Henry.
Thanks very much, Hal. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so just brief introduction to Swire. As Hal said, it's a 200-year-old company, still family run, and operates a number of businesses across real estate, aviation, shipping, and beverages. We've been in Vietnam, in and out of Vietnam for about 30 years. Started off in the early 90s with Cathay, but only more recently for Swire Properties with the project you just mentioned there. But I'd say Swire Properties are best known for their large retail-led mixed-use projects, mainly in China, where we have 6 or 5, soon to be 6. And one that I'd like to highlight today, which I think embodies a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, particularly what Luigi was just talking about with his presentation, is our project in Chengdu, called Sino-Ocean Taikoo Li Chengdu. So I don't know if we have the slides up, but yeah, maybe I'll just move out the way. So this was a really interesting project because it's actually centered around a 7th century Tang dynasty temple called the Dasi Temple. So 1400-year-old temple. And it was a challenge because there were a number of sort of planning constraints that we had to deal with when collaborating with the local district government and the local Chinese partner, the main one of which was the height restriction. So there was a restriction that no buildings could be built above the height of the Dasi Temple, which is only 4 stories high. I mean, overall, this project, just to give you a sense of the scale, is about 200,000 square meters. It's a mix of an outdoor open-air retail mall of about 100,000 square meters, a hotel, and then an office building. But predominantly, it's retail-led. And we worked on this project with the Oval Partnership, who firm of architects, very experienced in preserving heritage and sort of cultural projects. And if I just flick through, you can see here, so this is a map, but you can see number one right in the center there, that's the Dasi temple. And then there's 5 other heritage buildings which we had to work with. And as I mentioned, that height restriction was a challenge, but also an opportunity to create something that's very, very different, because immediately your big box or vertical retail, traditional style mall goes out the window. And what we end up creating was this lanes style arrangement of individual buildings that has a lot of open public space, people to walk around in, a lot of areas for artwork. And we drew inspiration from sort of 3 key areas of local Chengduese or local Sichuanese culture, being the sort of typically relaxed and sort of slow pace of life and love of entertainment there. The importance of tea culture and social interactions being conducted around tea ceremonies and having tea. And then also the fact that traditionally a lot of business and commerce was done in lanes in sort of high density inner city areas. So actually not dissimilar to Saigon itself. And we created this concept of fast and slow lanes. So you can see the yellow dotted line there is the fast lane, where the outer ring of sort of traditional luxury retail for people to go and do their transactional retail, if you see it, if we can call it that. And then the green dotted lines are more of the slow lane, traditional practices, so the tea houses, the F&B, more sort of lifestyle focused offerings. You can see some of the images here. So there's a real sort of appreciation and preservation of the traditional design. The materials were all locally sourced. And of those 6 buildings, there's one called the Guangdong Hall, which was traditionally an opera house and community center, which has been renovated but maintained as a fully sort of multifunctional community center for events and pop-up functions. So it's really about kind of still respecting what the original use was, but adapting it for a more modern reality. You can see here lots and lots of sort of open public space. And because the mall has no, I don't really call it the mall, the sort of the retail area has no physical boundary, it really bleeds into the local communities surrounding the Dasi temple area. And with that comes this sort of lovely interaction of the local communities there and the shoppers who go to the retail space. A few more images here. See some of the original sketches, and this was a picture of the original scene back in the Tang Dynasty, I imagine. And then here, just to end, these are the 6 original heritage buildings that were preserved and celebrated really by the design. So yeah, thank you for the chance to just introduce this. And I think it's a good example, as I say, of some of the themes we've been talking about today. And from what I've heard from the presentation so far, there seems to be huge opportunity here in Saigon, in Vietnam, and we would love to be involved in that in some way. So thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Having been to Chengdu, actually, I went there about a year ago and stayed at the Temple House, which is a hotel property owned by Swire. And I call the kind of whole area Taiku Li. It's kind of like the Batman cave, because the hotel is so sleek and modern, but it's really infused with kind of like the heritage. And then it's kind of, I call it the Batman cave because, you know, in the basement, it's like really, really modern. And then when you go upstairs, it's this lavish estate. So it's really got a cool view, kind of vibe to it. And like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not endorsing, or I'm not sponsored by Swire, but they are looking to do a cool project here. So give Henry a call if interested. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
We have not too much time, unfortunately. We're going to just do maybe one question from the audience here. If anyone has questions for any of the panelists, we'd love to kind of have that now. Anyone? All good? Yes, we have Duke here. He's got a question.
So for John, John, right? Henry.
John Swire. Yeah.
Henry, so in that development you're showing, is the ownership, is that wholly by a singular entity, or is that by multiple owners?
It's actually a joint venture between us and a local Chinese partner. local Chinese developer who manage the construction and the sort of interfacing with the local government. So it's a 50-50 joint venture between us and Sino-Ocean Land. Yeah.
So all the shop houses are owned by one.
No, they're not. And I suppose that's a good segue into one of the biggest contrasts I've noticed from having worked in China and here in Vietnam, that in Vietnam, as I see it, in so many projects, the shop houses are sold off strata title, right? So the developer, the owner, doesn't retain control over what retail goes in to that those units. So it's very hard to create a holistic and consistently high quality atmosphere and experience for the users of that physical space, because it has multiple different owners. In the example that I gave, the joint venture owns 100% of all of those buildings and has full control to lease them out to whoever they choose. So we really control the experience.
Thank you.
Excellent. That wraps up today's panel about adaptive reuse and renovation. Thank you. We'd like to move on to our next keynote speaker, Riccardo Panunzio. He's been following us for the duration of the seminar. Thank you for joining us from Italy here today. He is the program manager of Lazio Innova. I'll let him kind of explain what he does, and he has a 15-minute keynote he has to share, so we'll just kind of kick it off. We're going to let him share his screen, and he'll move on from there. Thank you, Riccardo.
Okay, good. So once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. It's a very interesting morning. I've been following it from all over the world, people participating and giving some great insights on culture and cultural heritage and the management of it in various forms. My angle will be on the public incentive. As I am a program manager within this Lazio Innova, which is a regional development agency, which provides support and finance and grants in support to small and medium enterprises. Okay, so first of all, I just wanted to give you a context of what is happening in Italy in general. So on the one side, we have a system, a cultural system, which generates nearly 100 billion euros with a multiplier effect of 1.8 on the rest of the economy. So it is very important in Italy. Some people call it the petroleum, but the other important fact is that it employs over 416,000 companies and 1.5 million people work in this industry. So it's a very important industry. It provides great opportunities and it's a growing industry. Okay, it also creates 32 billion euros in tourist expenditure. And that is one important fact. We actually face different challenges from yours and the ones which I've heard from the Asean area. One of these is polarization, what we call polarization. The top 20 Italian museums account or attract. This is a great problem because we have basically every little town has wonderful jewels of architecture or history and cultural history. And when the main attractors are so few, they do provide a problem with actually the management of this. This is also followed with another example. Nearly 20% of total visitors in Italy only four main attractors. One is the Pantheon, there's the Colosseum, clearly Pompeii, and Capodimonte in Campania. So the problem is that the smaller Italian cultural heritage centers really have very little visitors and are usually excluded by visits. Another important problem we have is with regards to exhibits. We have a huge amount of cultural heritage which has been found, saved, and maintained, but mostly it isn't displayed. So the main museums that possess over 50,000 objects each are only able to exhibit 8% of this. The other problem is that the cultural heritage is very hard to consult because it hasn't been identified or registered in a vast number. Well, clearly, the most important artifacts have, but there is a great backlog of museum artifacts which are basically hidden. As far as the digital infrastructure is concerned, only 37% of museums have their archives, assets archived in digital format. Only half have a website, okay, and 14% with only ticketing services. And the use of multimedia is very, very limited. Video projections are less than a quarter, and 16% of visiting of sites offer the opportunity to use video guides, and 10% only offer virtual tours. So this gives you an idea of what is happening, but clearly something more important has happened over the past months, which I've heard, I must say, a few mentions during today's panel, but maybe not as many as the problem is certainly should have raised. In any case, in Italy, it has had a terrific impact, with 19 million fewer visitors and a loss of about 78 million euros in the first quarter of 2020. This is quite devastating. So now what I wanted to share with you is a video of what we believe, as far as the Lazio region is concerned, is a solution to what we have been building over the past 10 years. I ask the cabin room to send the video, please.
Yeah, we're going to play the video here. So Ricardo, we're going to switch hosts here. Great, thank you.
And it came out when basically on the iPhone or smartphones, or the concept of smartphones had just been invented by Apple. And what we really wanted to do there was to build a number of projects which centered which were attracted around one important heritage site, which wasn't one of. So for Rome and Lazio region, Colosseum and Rome is certainly a black hole in that sense, but wanted to bring tourists to visit the territory in a much better way. So what we built was this Lazio Cultural Heritage Tech Center. It's one where we leverage with public funds and participation of small and medium enterprises and other sponsors. We leverage the possibility, the opportunity to build concept projects and other type of projects supporting and valorizing the cultural heritage in order to attract tourism. Okay, so since that video and that project, we are spending 41 million euros. Okay, and this gives you an idea of what we're spending it on. The biggest part is 23.2 million on the adaptive and technological projects. So we are basically getting a number of, we have made a public advice. We are providing, therefore, the numbers which, so out of these 23.2 million euros, we will be financing, we're looking to finance a number in the region of 40 projects. We have involved 247 cultural heritage sites, and the idea is to start from one site and bring and provide projects which are inclusive and include a number of other smaller sites within an area. So that is how the public funds are being used. As you can see here is gives you an idea of how they've been investing, and nearly half of them are going into museums. But we are also financing activities of renovation and support in favor of libraries, archaeological sites, and monuments and monumental complexes. Okay, so public policy and what we have been doing in the Lazio region is creating and giving the opportunity to our enterprises which have specialization in managing cultural heritage and exporting that know-how and service to other parts in the world. And that's why we're very happy to be here in this important meeting, because we believe that what we consider in Italy peripheral cultural heritage sites, which in other parts of the world are quite simply cultural heritage sites, in which the aim is that to attract tourism and provide a great experience and create economic opportunities. So the last slide really was one in which I hope you'll be able to see. There are a number of videos which were produced from the first set of projects, which were produced in the cultural technological district of Lazio. On the left, we have some talking pictures, which when you got close to would tell the story of the Farnese family. In that case, we have talking exhibits, which you could touch the exhibit screen, and then a video would start explaining how these amphorae or chiatos in these cases would be used. These are from Etruscan findings. Video wall mapping video mapping on screen on this is on the Farnese Palace, Palazzo Farnese. Immersive video projection timelines. Here we explain the whole Farnese family, 200 years of the family's great period within a massive video projection at 360 degrees. We had augmented reality and so on. So I wanted to just, the last note is if I wanted to explain quickly what is the idea behind what we do. In 1900, Hildebrand Chocolate Factory created the cards, which I've been showing in this presentation. It was, the challenge was to imagine how we would live in year 2000. And I thought it was very interesting. It was a lovely metaphor of how we can use innovation and public policies in support of cultural heritage. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Riccardo, calling in from Italy today. We're gonna wrap up. The last part of our seminar today is a panel discussion about those public sector incentives. So we're super happy to be having two people with us here today in person. They are from the private sector, so we're gonna hear from them and their experiences. And then we have two guests calling in virtually, Hilmar and Professor Luigi Crosset. So they'll be calling in as well. So Adam Fowler, Investment Director of Eco Park, one of the biggest developments, I believe it's a township actually, classified as a township in Hanoi. So grateful that he's here to join us today. And then we have Tui Huang. She is the General Director of Sonatas Building. It's a gleaming new tower right in Japantown. Their company is also developing many more projects in Saigon and the rest of Vietnam. Anyways, we'll be connecting with the virtual panelists first. We're gonna start with Hilmar. So Hilmar, who is Hilmar? He is from the Culture Ministry of Education out of Indonesia. And he's gonna comment here about what has Indonesia seen in relation to these kind of public incentives and what more can these kind of institutions at the public level do to engage with developers? Hilmar, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. We'd love for you to kind of chime in on that.
Well, thank you. Can I share my screen here?
Sure, yes.
Yeah. The host has to allow me to do that. Thank you. So instead of like talking about laws and regulations, I will quickly walk you through a concrete example that we have recently done. This is the old city of Semarang in Indonesia. So this is to give you an idea where it is. It's in the central part of the northern coast, in the central part of Java. It's an area of 31 hectares. It consisted of more or less 300 buildings, like historic buildings, of which 147 have been renovated already. It is constructed back in the 18th century, and it was the center of the colonial government back in the 19th century, but it was largely abandoned in the last few decades. For several reasons. So the revitalization of the old city began in 2017. And there was road rehabilitation, water drainage installation, building renovation, lighting, other public facilities. And it was a bottom-up process, and this is where the incentive goes in. It was difficult in the beginning to identify the owners because for tax reasons. So once there was this tax holiday provided by the local city government, then the owners showed up and they were involved pretty much in the revitalization process. And we entered the second phase in 2019, and this was focusing very much on community development, heritage literacy project, including of street vendors and other stakeholders in the area. And this is the old city now. The adaptive use by state-owned enterprises, offices, banks, private companies, coffee and restaurant service providers, and so on. And yeah, it has become a tourist destination for sure. And it is now one of the most important tourist sites in Central Java, so to say. And yeah, of course, the culinary center businesses are flourishing in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's pretty much very young culture that emerges now in that area. And it has also become a cultural center, the major site of festivals, music performances, art exhibition, organized both by government and community organizations. And yeah, these are the impacts of the revitalization of the old city. The social impact, of course, before it had a notorious reputation as a site of crime and drugs. But this has entirely changed. It is today a popular place for young hipsters, really. The economic impact, although not that significant, I have to acknowledge, but the local businesses have flourished after the first phase was finished, contributed for sure job creation, food, beverage, cleaning, maintenance, security, informal sector, and so on. And the tax income from that part of the city increased by 30% in 2 years. And now, of course, because of the pandemic, it has decreased a little bit. And the cultural impact is, I think, it has become a meeting place of different communities, and he has created a new urban culture that is based on respect, tolerance, collaboration, in which young people play a very important role. And I think the role of the government here is more like a facilitator of the entire process. It is very much community driven, the businesses were involved, and young people had a very strong voice in this endeavor. And I think working together with these different stakeholders is very essential in this experience. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Hilmar. The most important one is the young hipsters, it sounds like. Luigi, we'd love to pass it on to you. You're calling in from Italy, I believe. We'd love for you to comment. You obviously work with the Italian government and agencies, and all these public incentives are driving economic growth for Italy. We'd love to hear from you kind of how can these agencies better support these initiatives in your experience? Luigi, you can unmute yourself as well. Luigi, if you can unmute your microphone.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Good. So first of all, thank you for inviting me, and a special thanks to the Italian authorities and to my friend and colleague, Luigi Campanale, too many Luigis here, and with whom we have done all the previous events on heritage preservation. So thanks with all my heart for this invitation. And I would like to make a general point. I mean, the general point is, and that is because I have listened to some of the remarks in the previous interventions that, in a way, tended to oppose new interventions with restoration of old buildings. The point is that they do not collide. They are two sides of the same coin. Because when you build in a built space, either you restore a building which already exists, or you build a totally new one, you are effectively renovating / restoring the existing city. So the two things must really coexist and in shaping the city of the future. The most important thing that the Italian and European experience can do to more sort of to countries that are tackling this this problem of the restoration of heritage is to help them avoid making the mistakes that we did in Europe and in Italy, which was mainly to destroy a lot of things and to waste a lot of land. For example, let me make a point of what someone has asked before. The question was about the cost of the renovation against the cost of new buildings. It is true that renovation is a bit more costly than building a new building. But it is also true that in the medium and long term, new buildings cost much more because they need new infrastructure, they need new roads, they need new wires, they need new sewage pipelines, they need a lot of other things. And then by occupying virgin land, they need to be connected with existing city, which means traffic jam, which means health problems with the people who are traveling and commuting every day. So really there is no alternative to do a very simple thing that I could sort of sum up in a slogan, which is build on the built environment in two ways, either by building new buildings or by restoring old ones. Heritage, which means masterpieces, or even ordinary building. A good example of that is the project that my friend Luigi has just presented. In that project, it was evident a very sort of careful mix of restoration and new buildings. But I could call that a restoration project because it was done within the built environment of the city of Ho Chi Minh. It was not a new a new intervention, and it was set in something that is already living, giving new strains of life, giving new way of living to the old buildings, and giving them new sense and new meanings, not only as monuments, but as possible catalysts of new process, just because they are already burdened with a lot of meanings coming from their past. So that is the main point. How to do that? I can quote the Italian experience. There are two fronts. One front is the protection legislation. Namely, you cannot pull down that building because that building is important. And the other side is incentives. So you are the owner of an heritage building, you have tax deduction because we know that it is costly to maintain it. Another very important recent front is to give tax deduction, so incentives, if you either retrofit from an energy point of view, the existing building, being it heritage or just ordinary, or if you upgrade or expand or renovate your existing building. And this tax deduction up to a limit can amount to 50, 65%, and recently 110% of the money that you have spent within certain limits, which means that that makes much more convenient for everyone, not only for the owner, but also for the potential investors, I mean, real estate industry, to invest on heritage preservation, heritage renovation, because it makes a lot of sense. And you could think that this is a vast expenditure on the public of public money, but it is not. If you plot that in the long run against the costs of doing the same thing in virgin land, which will reduce the agricultural soil, which would cause a lot of problems in terms of community health, like I said before. So this is, I think, the main aspect. On another side, I am personally involved in trying to establish a sort of cultural link between the university I work with, which namely is the University of Venice, and some other Asian universities, specifically some in Ho Chi Minh. And the idea is to launch a sort of shared, co-organized masters of architectural restoration, because I have discovered in my experience in Southeast Asia that even when there is the will to restore, for some reason, complex to investigate, but I mean evident to everyone, there is not exactly the technology and the actual mental attitude to properly restore a building. So the idea is to share our knowledge and our culture, which in restoration, I might say, is quite extensive and quite sort of developed, with other cultural and educational institutions, especially in Southeast Asia and especially in Vietnam. So this is what we are trying to do, but I mean, the key point for restoration is the actual public legislation in terms of incentives more than prohibition.
Luigi, we're going to move on to our other panelists. We're way over time. So I'd love to, you mentioned about interventions and renovations of existing projects. The two developers that we have here today, we're welcoming Adam Fowler. He's the investment director of Eco Park. As I mentioned, it's a really large township in Hanoi. It's a new, entirely new kind of project. And then we also have Tui, she's the general director of Sonatus, which is developing many office buildings in Saigon. We'd love to hear from them. I mean, you guys are building things from the ground up. You're not really renovating. It's not really an option for you guys, given your business strategy. But if given the public incentives, and I'm sure you've been given them for these new projects, what do you need to see from your end to really drive those developments of new projects? I'll start with Adam here. Sure.
I know it's dinner time and everyone's probably hungry and maybe even a little bit grumpy. So
There's
I'll try
gin, by the way, outside.
There's
right
some gin
outside.
Yeah, when I saw the topic of the discussion, I think it was an interesting one for me because, as you mentioned, Eco Park does not participate to date in any real renovation projects. So we're doing greenfield development. And for those of you that are not familiar with Eco Park is a township that's around 500 hectares up in suburban Hanoi. And it's kind of similar in scale and size to Fumihung, but maybe even a little bit larger. And our philosophy there is to develop kind of an integrated mixed-use township with residential, commercial services, schools, hospitals, basically building a small city community within our project. So that's the only project that we've developed to date underneath the parent company, but we're currently proposing around 60 different projects in different provinces in Vietnam to apply a similar type of concept, but at different scales depending on the economy in the region. So some of those projects may range from 50 hectares on the small end, which I think in terms of this discussion is actually quite a big project. But some of our projects may even reach to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 hectares. So the way that we look at development is a little bit more similar to a government, a regional government, as opposed to sort of a single building developer, because we're really looking more at the fundamentals of the macro economy. So in terms of, I mean, obviously, I can't speak a lot on what ideal incentives would be for restoration, not having that experience. But obviously, profitability is always key to engage the private sector. It needs to be financially viable. And one of the key lessons that we've learned and that we've applied in our strategy with Eco Park is that the size of the land matters. Because if the government, for example, was to allocate a single building or a single plot of heritage land to a private sector investor and then ask them to restore it or make something of it, obviously it's going to be very difficult to make that profitable or financially viable potentially. But what we look at is how to convince the government to give us larger plots of land so that we can allocate more of that land for uses that are non-profitable. So for example, in the Hung Yen development up in the suburbs of Hanoi, more than 20% of that project is open green and blue space. So we can create public amenities and services, parks, lakes, water-based activities, basically all generally non-profitable facilities that will benefit the entire community, and that will also ensure that that land is not developed as something that would be competing with what we've already developed or somehow impose on the community in any way. It will permanently be a value-added piece of land. So by engaging planners and developers to take on larger projects, as long as they do it responsibly, and then zoning and controlling the use of that land through the approvals process, then the government can make the project more financially viable, and then also ensure that an adequate amount of land is used either for restoration of, it could be a heritage site, or in our case, it's more restoration or preservation of nature is what we focus on. So.
Cool. Luigi mentioned something earlier too. You know, renovation doesn't necessarily mean the building itself, but the neighborhood that it occupies. I think Thui's project is perfect in case it's the newest kind of high-end premium office development here in Saigon. It's asking for high rents, and they've got great companies and that can afford it. But they've really considered where they are. It's right in the middle of Japantown, right in District 1 of Ho Chi Minh City. How have you guys considered how you kind of exist in neighborhoods, and was it driven by public incentives, and what do you need to get a project kind of off the ground?
For us, hi, my name is Thui. For us, it's kind of because in the beginning when we got the project, is specifically for a Japanese group, was gonna build a residential and hotel. But then during the negotiation, they changing their perspective on the Vietnamese economy and the investment at a time. So it's end up that we have been invest in as a local developer. We have been invest in the structure of the building without any commitment from the Japanese. So it's kind of because we wanted to use the Japanese neighborhood to build something that modern, but is also engaged in the community around that area. But when we know that the deal is not going through with the residential project, we decided to turn it into an office project, but it still hold that core atmosphere that we want to do in the beginning for Japanese. And it's kind of like, oh, it's a big building, but it's have a feel in it where you have a secret garden if you go inside, and so that's kind of Japanese style. And we still keep the Japanese architectural consultant to stick with the fact that we already convinced the government to give us the land to build a Japanese aspect of the whole area, but more modern. And so after I come back, so I'm gonna make it quick because I think it's run out of time. But after I come back, I just came back for about 2 years, and I've been fortunate enough to work with one local developer that have the opportunity to have a lot of land and offered by the government. And part of that because they are trusted by the government. That's the most important key issue, where when they are trusted by the government helping and allowing them to do that at a great price, so that the return on the project, like Adam said before, is really a key part. Because for a private investor, we don't want to have a project coming up and prolong loss on the project. We need to make a return. So part of being trusted by the government and have a credibility for them to trust us to give us some land or things like that in the city to build and keep the heritage, but the price needs to be affordable and it needs to be fair. It's a win-win situation so that we can make a return on our investment. And the second part is there's some discussion before, is maintaining the building or build the whole building brand new is cheaper. Is also in terms of, for us, it also depends. So for me, I was growing up in the city, and I've been living in the United States for a very long time. So when I came back, a lot of the childhood memory of the building is still there, and I feel that it's valuable. But sometimes, there's a discrepancy in terms of investment and the art and the cultural for the previous generation. So it's take time to convince them to do that. And a part of that, because of the preventive maintenance of the building, is cost a lot higher to maintain the old building or restructure it and still keep the old material. But then after a long time, we have to maintain it, and the cost of maintaining is cost a lot more to maintain a brand new building. So it's also depends. So if the project is easy to maintain and the maintenance fee over time is profitable, then we will consider it. And as a part of the new generation coming back, I'm trying to keep those things as an option. But if it's not really profitable for us in terms of our investment and what required for us to make a return, then we can reconsider and negotiation between the government, maybe make some incentive for the land or things like that to help us to maintain, if that is the requirement from the government. Yeah, so I think that's the two key important part for us.
Excellent. Well, thank you for our panelists for sharing today. We're at the closing of our seminar here today. So again, big thanks to our panelists. Thank you. Yeah. Hey guys, so that's the close of our seminar today about heritage preservation and economic development in ASEAN. We have some drinks outside by our gracious sponsor, Song Kai. It's free flow, so please have some and indulge. The panelists will be here for after discussion, and thank you for sharing. Thanks, guys. Cheers.